So we have to give ample time to have that put out to the community. The board is going to have questions. This is a very important issue that we want time, whether it's a week before or we did it tonight. The 3 weeks is irrelevant because we are going to do it before school starts. So there will be a definitive answer. August 11th is the date that we all decided that is when our next meeting could be. We're actually, there's 2 board members tonight that weren't able to be here. So we do want, obviously, as many of the board members here when this is discussed.
Okay, but how are other districts addressing this beforehand? Because you're not really giving parents ample time.
Well, listen, here.
You guys are giving yourself ample time and not the parents.
Right, here's.
That's what it sounds like.
Right, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you time tonight you can ask those questions. We can't keep addressing them, okay? Like I said, we're going to take that. We can direct it to the superintendent, and those questions can be answered. But we can't, with the amount of people that we need to allow speak, we're not going to get into a question and answer. We just don't have the time tonight. But we are going to take all that into consideration when we discuss as a board and with the superintendent. Okay? So if someone would like to speak.
I have a question.
Sir, if you'd like to speak and present a question.
I'm here to talk about critical race theory and about, is that an agenda that the school's going to have?
That's not even on the agenda.
Okay, so we can't talk about it because of the other school districts were, and I think it should be opened up if you're going to have it as a curriculum.
At the end.
This is less because I've got a couple of kids coming in and, paying taxes and that. I just want to see what curriculums are they going to have.
Yeah, this is,
I found the mass too.
right, but
This
if,
is an open, and I've been to different high schools, and I think it's important where parents can talk on a civilized manner here.
no, I understand that, and this part of the agenda is the public comment on any agenda item. So
Right now,
that's not on the agenda. Right now,
August 11th, would it be on that one there?
I don't know what's on the agenda for that right now. We will. What is going to be on the agenda?
It says B, anti-racism.
Mm-hmm.
Is that one of them there?
That, no, the anti-racism commitment is a commitment from the district that we have in place, that everyone is treated with equity, equality, and fairness. And we have programs in place in our schools to address that and to make sure that all that is followed and everything is being followed. So that is not, at the end of the meeting, there is announcements and public comment, but right now, this is agenda items, and that is not on the agenda. It's not an agenda item.
We want to hear.
Mr. Allison, why don't we do this? Could we just recommend that be on the agenda for next session? August 11th? Like, how do you go about doing that?
I will discuss that with the superintendent as far as what items will be on the agenda.
But we can recommend if we would like.
We will, the gentleman made his statement. It's so noted, and we'll discuss that with the superintendent. Thank you. Do you want to speak? Go ahead. Yes, sir, go right ahead. If you'd state your name, and like I said, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, good evening. My name is James Newby. Pleasure to be here with all of you and the Policy Board, faculty, etc. 21-year resident of Joliet, 3 graduates from Joliet West, 1 student currently in Troy, and 2 currently in Joliet West. So got ample reason to be here tonight. And since the items that are on the hearts and minds of most people here are not on the agenda, but the word agenda is on the agenda, my agenda item tonight is there are a lot of people here who would like to know how we get to influence the agenda as the stakeholders who have our children in the school system. we would like a policy and procedure made clear up front on the website, okay? Made available to every parent who has an agenda item they would like to submit for your discussion because it's important to us. We would like to see a ground-up movement of parent involvement in the agenda that is discussed by the board. So I don't know if that's in place, but apparently, just from the opening comments tonight, that does not appear to be in place. Okay. I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I know this isn't a question and answer session. I'm speaking impromptu, but I'm speaking from the heart, and I hope you all realize our hearts and our minds would like to have a voice from the ground up. And with that, I'll conclude my comments, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, if you'd state your name, please.
My name is Leah Ryan, and I have two daughters at Joliet West. I first want to thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts and concerns here tonight. I appreciate all that you do for the school. Please understand that. And I know that any decisions made are the best for the students, I would hope. I am representing myself, my husband, and as well as many other parents who could not be here in person tonight and those who are. Many parents, teachers, guardians, and grandparents wish to see their children return to school without a mask. My hope and prayer, really, is that this school year can get back to some semblance of normalcy, starting with the mask being optional for students and staff as well, regardless of vaccination status. Both of these are personal medical decisions that affect a person's individual health. My desire is that there would be no discrimination based on these medical choices. Personally, a little hard for me, I've experienced the journey of my best friend's daughter being vaccine injured as a child. She was left to spend her 11 years of life in a wheelchair and unable to care for herself. It was a very, very hard road, which ended sadly in her death. My point of sharing her story is that every parent has differing yet valid reasons for making medically related decisions, either by experience, research, or knowing what is best for your children, or child or children. Adverse reactions and heart issues in children. I do know a few. They also advise parents of the potential downfalls of children wearing masks, stating that if a mask is going to be worn for more than an hour, it should be changed every hour. Otherwise, there is a risk of potential infection, and the box label of disposable surgical masks even states that. We all know students aren't changing into a clean mask every hour while in school, and I'd be willing to bet most reusable masks don't get washed before wearing a second time. Maybe even dug out of the depths of the backpacks, or personally, my purse. With that being said, I believe as parents, we know our children best and have full capability to make these decisions, such as whether or not to have them receive this injection, or whether or not a mask is needed. All summer long, children have played sports, they've gone to church, restaurants, stores, and played with friends, both indoors and out. The risk of contracting COVID virus is minimal. And according to studies, schools are not where major spreading happens. It is just understood, and common sense is, in my humble opinion, that if your child is sick, you keep them at home until they are fever-free without medicine for 24 hours and well enough to return. They might miss a couple of days, but that's normal. When we implement mitigation of quarantining, however, this furthers the disruption of our education. We've had enough of that, especially if they're healthy. Missing a week or more of school simply by being around someone who became sick is unnecessary, as we are around viruses every day of our lives. We are exposed to hundreds of them daily, unbeknownst to most of us. But that is where is proper hygiene, hand washing, and nourishing of our bodies comes into importance. As parents, we must refuse to treat our healthy children as if they're sick. And that starts by being able to send them to school not wearing masks. Second is the removing of unnecessary quarantining when medical discrimination based on vaccination status should also play no role in any strategies involved. On behalf of myself, my husband, and those who couldn't be here, and those who are, I really do appreciate your willingness to hear my heart and my concern. I appreciate your time serving as board members. I know it's not easy. I can't imagine the time that you people put in here for no money. I commend you for it. I truly do. But in closing, over 130 schools, I think it's over 135 now, have made the decision to make masks optional, with many more following suit. We hope that JTHS can be added to that list. And please, unmask our children.
State your name, please.
Hi, Louise Larson. I'm speaking on behalf of Awake Illinois and many other parent group members, which I will list at the end. Given the nature of the COVID-19 pandemic, parents across the nation are asking, will my right to make decisions about what's best for my child's health be respected? As many families in the state of Illinois await word from their local school board on the 2021-2022 school year, my hope and prayer is for prudent discernment in all decisions affecting our children. The represented parties in this letter implore local school boards to survey the whole of their community as soon as possible on expectations for this coming school year versus a one-size-fits-all approach to all Illinois schools. We respect the integrity of our democracy and the autonomy of school boards who are elected to work in the best interests of their stakeholders. On behalf of the Illinois parents, advocates, and taxpayers, we support Illinois' parental rights to make decisions in the best interest of their child or children regarding facial masking, viral testing, health records, and/or of COVID-19 injection. We request that the school boards respect their guidance from the CDC, the ISBE, the IDPH, and not equate to mandates. Under Title 23 of the Administrative Code, the Illinois State Board of Education is not in a position to force, reward, or threaten any school district, local board of education regarding said agency guidance. The same rule applies to the ISBE on any stipulated guidance. As representatives of thousands of Illinois parents and taxpayers, we request that your leadership reflect support of parental consent, civil rights, and the liberties protected by laws, the regulations, and Constitution of Illinois and the United States of America. Should any school district, personnel, and/or agent enact policies, guidelines, protocols that are in violation with any law or protection of Illinois students, legal action may be taken. We trust that Illinois school districts and administrators will emulate the leadership of districts such as Warsaw, 316, Vandalia, 203, Lamont, 113, Timothy Christian, Red Hill Community School District, and hundreds of others who are acting in accordance with the state data and will facilitate a return to normal for students, staff, and communities after more than a year of sacrifice during the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. Godspeed as you draft and enact the 2021 school year policies. And I will just add to that, at Plainfield District 202 went mask optional last night, as did a very large school district, Naperville 204, went mask optional. So there are a lot of school boards who are deciding to keep the masks off the kids at the beginning of the school year. And I represent in part of several different groups, and there are over 30,000 of us.
state your name, please. Thank you.
My name is Scott Green. Good evening. It's a privilege to be here in front of you all, really to express my First Amendment rights. I've really been thinking about this a lot. How would I speak to a school board and really, I think, speak on behalf of many people in this room? I assume we're probably in the same boat. I see men and women here, I assume are mothers and fathers. I guess that's safe to say. You know, the agenda is a little different these days. But we have mothers and fathers and grandfathers in this room and on this board as well. And I think back of when I graduated high school back in 2000, which was quite a few years ago. But before I graduated, there was an agenda that was started. It was called Tolerance and Diversity. And I'm looking at this, what probably is on the agenda. It's prevention of and response to bullying, intimidation, harassment, presentation, and also suicide and depression awareness and prevention presentation. Now, what I'm getting at is I've seen an agenda from when I was in high school all the way to where we are now. Now, you may disagree with me, but that's okay, that's your right. But what I have noticed is the tolerance and diversity has opened up a gateway to really an agenda of homosexuality. And what it has done is it has allowed that to be incorporated in our schools. I don't have child-age children yet, but I do have a niece that is in school, and she has already been exposed to that. She's beginning to question those things because that is in her school district right now. And then we carry this on. We see, I know you guys are very uncomfortable about this, but that's okay. This is why we're here. We're here to speak about these things. So here's the deal is, it opened up the door for that. And then the next thing is now we're at this mask mandate. A couple of years ago, I believe that the state of Illinois tried to pass mandating vaccines. I believe it was the HPV vaccine. And they were taking away the religious exemption from the parents that would say, no, I don't want this HPV vaccine. So what I'm seeing is the furtherance of an agenda, and what they're doing is they're using the school districts and the school boards to do what they couldn't do. And what I'm saying is if you require masking if the child is not vaccinated for something that's still not FDA approved, that is still under an Emergency Use Act authorization. So this is the problem is what you're doing is they're using you to do something that they couldn't do. And so what I'm saying is when the children comes in with a mask, we see this all the time. We want to talk about anti-bullying. You see a child that may come in with a mask or no mask, that right there in itself is going to create some sort of bullying because a child sees something different. And so we really need to be mindful of these things. What are we influencing our children to do? Why are we creating such a division? Why are we doing all these things? And I just talked to a law enforcement officer outside today, and he talked about the percentage rate of suicide in young adults, actually in children, school-age children, and it's alarming. And I would assume that with the bullying, let's say a child doesn't wear a mask and they feel left out or they're picked on because they're not wearing a mask because of the messaging that is taking place in our culture right now, that if you don't go along with the rules, that you're not right. We see this a lot. And many people are actually getting more and more confident now to speak up about these things. But I want to encourage each of you to be mindful of the decisions that you're making. Because I really do see this is that our state government is utilizing you to do what they couldn't do. So really keep this in mind. I appreciate your time, and I hope this was clear for you. But I have really seen this agenda happen from the late 90s, and now we're here into 2020. And I know it's probably not on the agenda just yet, but when it comes to the sex education that is being introduced in the schools, what I'm talking about is the tolerance and diversity, as I firmly believe, has opened up to this foundation of homosexuality. The next thing is, and it's a shocker, but I would sure hate for a teacher to be teaching my children about sexual behaviors and sexual acts that I would be embarrassed to teach my own child that. I would sure hate for a teacher to be doing the same thing. But I'm firm, and I will say this, that I firmly believe that this teaching right here will open up to pedophilia.
All right, sir,
And
that is 5 minutes, sir.
Okay, that was a quick 5 minutes. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Good evening. If you could state your name, please.
My name is Michelle Lee, and I am a Joliet Junior College trustee. I understand that you guys are unpaid. This is basically a voluntary position. I sit through 4 and 5 hour meetings, and I understand that when you have parents coming to speak to you, it makes your meetings a lot longer. So I think that we all just hope that you will listen and take into consideration. I would like to read Robert's Rules of Orders in reference to the public comment on any agenda item. Rules for in-person comments, general procedures. The village welcomes public comments at meetings for both items being discussed as part of the topic being discussed on and new items that are not on the meeting's agenda. Members of the public wishing to comment on specific agenda items will have the opportunity to do so once the presentation has concluded, and the village board has an opportunity to ask initial questions. At that time, the meeting presider will ask if there are members of the public who wish to comment, or commenters may ask to be recognized. Members of the public wishing to comment on items not on the listed on the agenda, but related to village business, will have the opportunity to do so during the meeting's designated public comment period, which is at the end of this agenda. So if you stay till the end, they'll reopen up public comment and you could talk about anything you'd like. I'd also like to read, to help keep, no, hold on. This is pertinence of comments. Public comments shall relate to matters within the purview of the respective public body. Comments shall relate to either items on the agenda or other matters related to village business. These parents are here because they are all concerned. So I would just like to say that even if it's not on the agenda, they should be able to state their opinions about what is going on. I would also, thank you. I don't have a lot of time, guys. So thank you, though. I would also like to make you aware, in case you are not aware, of Dr. Fulmich. He is from Germany, and he opened in May a case against the CDC, WHO, and Davos Group for war crimes against humanity. That is why Dr. Fauci's emails were FOIA'd. He just did an interview on July 7th that was posted on July 9th with a Dr. Martin. Dr. Martin works for the government patent. He basically processes and keeps tracks of all of the government patents, okay? And they literally have proof. The DOJ, on the interview, he says the DOJ has had this information since April. They literally have proof. This is I'm gonna sit here and I am gonna rattle off a few numbers for everyone to look up. Patent number 6372224 was in 99, I believe, if I go back in my notes. And coronavirus is nothing new, nothing novel. They have been filing patents for it since 1999, early as 2002 for actual human trials. Dr. Fauci is responsible for creating a bioweapon. He literally, Rand Paul in court showed that he funded gain-of-function research. If you don't know what gain-of-function research is, it is the gain of function to learn how to have this vaccine, which is not a vaccine, it is the S-spike protein. If you look at the patents, the S-spike protein is literally the coronavirus that they were researching. They are injecting us with the very same thing that they say that they are protecting us from. You guys, please look up Dr. Fulmich. This is the greatest crime against humanity. The DOJ has had this. Please protect our children and stop segregating them and separating them based on a vaccine. And Dr. Fauci, you know I should call him a doctor, Dr. Fauci has openly, there's a statement in these interviews, really please, Dr. Fulmich and Dr. Martin, please go look it up. Look up at this interview. It is an hour long, but there is over 10,000 doctors and thousands of lawyers. This is the biggest crime against humanity. We are living in such an important time in history. Please protect our children and do your research.
Good evening, sir. If you state your name.
My name is Jeremy Page. I will have a son that just fall freshman at West. And I am a lawyer and I deal with facts. And we've been hearing misinterpreted facts since I walked in here. Bullying, students will not get bullied because they have a mask or not have a mask on. I didn't interrupt anybody. I didn't interrupt anybody.
One minute. Everybody is going to be afforded an equal opportunity to speak, whether we agree or disagree. We have to give consideration to the speaker. He is given his 5 minutes equally as everyone else is. So let's, whether we agree with whoever has the floor, let's show consideration, allow them their 5 minutes, and then someone else can, give their stance on the floor. But at least respect the person that is talking and give him the floor without any jeering or any commentary coming back. We would appreciate that. Go ahead, resume, sir.
Thank you. I sit back and listen to math mandate being related to the gay agenda, which is amazing to me. I do agree with him. Yes, the mask mandate is related to the gay agenda. I don't know how that's irrelevant. I do agree with him that we do have a high suicide rate in young people, but let's be real, these young people are part of the LGBT community, and they're killing themselves because they don't feel safe. They're being bullied. The LGBT students are being bullied, not people wearing masks. We have to be honest. Like, I want my child to go to school. I have kids that are 10 and 7. They can't get the vaccine, so they will be wearing masks in school because I want them to come home, and I want them to be safe, and I want to protect myself. COVID is not something man-made. COVID is not a joke. COVID is real. I lost 5 close people to COVID, so it's not a joke. It's something that we need to take serious. If you don't want your kids to wear a mask, that's fine, but don't dictate what everybody else does. We cannot dictate, make a broad thing, nobody wears masks, because that's not fair to people who want to be healthy and who are safe. So when you all make decisions, I didn't interrupt you all.
Folks, please.
When you all make this choice, take in consideration the children's health, and take in consideration that many of them have to go home to people who are immunocompromised. So yes, kids might be healthy, they might, but who knows? They got family with diabetes, like my mother who had diabetes and died from COVID. So I take this serious. I don't take it as a joke. I don't take it as a gay agenda. I don't take it as us trying to push this agenda. No, it's us trying to be healthy, and we're concerned about our children's health and the health of this nation as a whole. So all I ask is that when you all take in consideration this mask mandate, don't just think about the children. Think about the people they have to go home to who might not have protection, and that's all I ask.
Thank you so much. Good evening. If you could please state your name.
Good evening, Susanna Ibarra. I have cousins, loved ones, and neighbors at Joliet Township High School, and I'm very proud of that. There's rules for everything you do in life, right? There's Robert's Rules of Order. There's rules about going to school. If the rule is that your kids have to wear a mask, if they're not vaccinated, then you know what? Educate your kids at home. Homeschool your kids. You're saying if your kid is sick, then don't go to school. There are single parents that don't have a choice. They have to work. They're the only one providing for their kid. So if the rules are that you have to wear a mask because it's healthy, because it's public health, and it's not just about us, it's about the kids that cannot be vaccinated. They're not old enough to be vaccinated. Ask Dakota Morgan's parents from Bolingbrook. She was about a week away from being vaccinated when she passed away of COVID, and it literally happened overnight like that. Ask her parents what they think. COVID is real. The biggest problem with fighting this pandemic is fighting the misinformation. Listening to Fox News, let me tell you something really quickly, that all of those people that are telling you don't mask, don't get vaccinated, every one of them is vaccinated. It's a mandate at Fox News, you have to be vaccinated to work there. So fighting the misinformation, and the most important, I did not interrupt anyone.
Can we hear, we'd like to hear, it's okay.
The most important thing is the children. I don't care how you feel as a parent. If they require your child to be vaccinated or wear a mask, then they have to be vaccinated or wear a mask. And your option as a parent with choices is to keep your kid at home and homeschool your child. We're talking about protecting the educators. We're talking about protecting the people in special services. We're protecting everyone from door to door. And that's what masks are about. In the countries like New Zealand, where they fought it hard, they washed the streets, they made masks a mandate, they literally shut down the whole entire country. They're without masks right now because they fought it hard. We can't be wiffle-waffly about our child's safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, ma'am. If you could state your name, please.
My name's Kayla Harmon. I have an upcoming junior, and there's some considerations that people are not taking into effect. My daughter cannot get vaccinated. I cannot get vaccinated. We are allergic. It will cause anaphylactic shock and kill us. We have a doctor's note. My daughter last year, unbeknownst to some people that say it can't happen, was told and bullied, why doesn't she want to get the shot? Why does my daughter have to tell somebody, oh, I can't get it because I'm allergic, and then be told that she's lying? My daughter I had COVID in January. It damn near killed me. We lost my mother. Yes, it's real. We are 6 months out. I still have my antibodies. I am now a test case. Every month I go to the doctors, I am tested. I have antibodies. To say to a child, you have to wear a mask because you might carry it. What about the kids that can't get it? You're now bullying them. My daughter cannot get the shot. I cannot get the shot. My daughter's gonna be forced for the rest of her high school career to wear a mask for a disease that I recovered from, that I still carry the antibodies for. My daughter read a book in high school, The Red Letter, The Scarlet Letter. In all evidence, that's what you're showing our children we're doing. My daughter will be wearing a mask. She's fine with wearing a mask. I am to the point, she wears one when she goes to work. We have the option at work whether we want to wear it or not. Half of our departments are covered with COVID shots, half of them aren't. If you want to wear a mask, you wear a mask. Nobody says anything about it. The problem is in the high schools, the kids don't have this. We already have a bullying problem at Joliet West, whether parents want to believe it or not. Kids have 204s based on having mental problems in school. They were struggling all last year. We were lucky enough to have 2 very good counselors on my daughter's case. Now she's being told, you're gonna have to wear a mask. So trying to blend in the first place for my poor child, she's now gonna be stuck out again. I just want you to look at things from the other side. There are people that cannot get this shot. It doesn't matter if they want it or not, they can't get it. My husband had the shot 3 weeks ago. We just got him out of ICU with a stroke. My goddaughter's fiance was in ICU for 2.5 months because he had a stroke after receiving an epileptic seizure. Is it real? Yes, but the shot is also causing problems. And by forcing people to tell people if they've got it or not is a HIPAA violation. Kids go to school right now that don't have their shots. They have medical conditions or they have religion issues. They're not forced to put anything on them that tells me that they haven't gotten their shots. Why are you forcing my child? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ma'am. If you could state your name, please.
Christine McGovern. I came in from because I read something on the internet of what was happening. I served 2 terms on my local school board, so I appreciate what you're doing and I appreciate the time and I understand the position that you're in. I'm here to represent the families and to get back to common sense. I don't know what happened, how we are here, how You guys are responsible to dictate to our families what the children should do. I understand what that gentleman said, that he prefers that everyone wears a mask. Let his child wear a mask. I understand what that other woman said about vaccinations. It's a choice. We live in America. It's medical freedom. We are forgetting our basics. It's important how we got here. It's important the decisions that you make right now, because our governor is going to do another shutdown. What are you going to do? Are you going to close the schools again? You can't. Suicide is up, drug overdose is up, mental illness is up. You guys are responsible for the students. You took that role, you were elected into that role. It's your job to look out for the mental health, the emotional health, and the physical health of the kids. No, obviously not the teachers union. And one last thing of what's going on with who we are getting our recommendations from. You know, the American Academy of Pediatrics just came out. All the kids should wear a mask. Who's the biggest donor to the American Pediatric? Pfizer. If that is not the biggest conflict of every interest, I don't know what is. But you all are responsible for what happens in this school. Make your decisions, stand by your decisions, think of the kids, the whole perspective of the kids. Their physical, their emotional, their mental. It's your job.
Thank you. Good evening, ma'am. If you say your name, please.
Sure. Hello, I'm short, so give me a, okay. Hi, my name is Katie Schlattman, and thank you very much for letting me come up here again, along with the other parents who are out here. We know you have a big job, and we appreciate what you do, and we really appreciate that you are elected and that you work for the parents, all of us. And as elected officials, you should know that, you know, voting comes in and out, and we'll remember the way you handle this situation. I also want to say I have 3 children who will be coming into this high school in the upcoming years, and I'm watching what's happening. And I like the words safety. It's a great word. It makes me feel safe, right? It also makes me feel at some point when you say you're doing this for my safety, you have the control. And because this is America, and because we have the choice, I don't want that control put on me and my children. I make those decisions for them. That is my God-given right as their mother, and I make those decisions with my husband. So however we see fit to vaccinate, not vaccinate, mask, not mask our children, that is our choice. When I am starting to get my choices handed to me, or being told how that is, a little word keeps popping in my head, like communism and Marxism, and how I'm doing this for the benefit of society. I'm sorry, but as much as I respect everyone else, I'm going to do what benefits my children and my family the best. And I have a son on the autism spectrum, and the mask has been a nightmare for him. And as any educator would know, a lot of children on the spectrum need to see facial expressions just to be able to interact with you appropriately, because their emotions are guided by that to how they're supposed to react to you. So masking him was absolutely a situation where then when he had to react to his peers, he was being bullied because he was reacting incorrectly to what social norms would be, just based on that silly thing on his face, which, if anyone knows the size of the SARS vaccine, I believe it is 1 micron. Why don't you look at the holes inside of some of those masks and see how big they are? Because you're essentially throwing sand at a fence with open, like a picketed fence. It's going to get through anyway. So however you feel about it is your choice, and I respect that. We're just asking for a choice ourselves as the parents, because this is still the United States of America, and I want to make that choice. The second you start taking that choice from me, I no longer respect you as somebody who's looking out for my best interest, but somebody who is dictating to me about what I should do with my children. So that's all I have. Thank you for your time. God bless you all.
Good evening, welcome. If you could please state your name, please.
Hi, Tina McGrath. My kids are grown. They're no longer in the school system, but I do have a granddaughter coming up. If I have the misfortune of still living in Illinois by the time she hits school, then I will continue to come to school board meetings and continue to speak. Shame on all of us for not realizing how far gone it's gotten with our schools, where we've given up so much control to school boards, to teachers' unions. That has to stop immediately. So you will get used to seeing more of us at every single meeting. Now, I am not a virologist, but I, like everybody else in this room, have this in common with Dr. Fauci. I have not seen a patient in at least 30 years, and neither has he. This is a man who was not elected. He was appointed. He's served under 5 presidents, and he's been wrong more times than he's been right. And we heard early on that masks didn't help prevent this virus. As this woman before me stated, it is such a small molecule, and the mask that every single one of us is wearing won't stop it. The world's deadliest virus is stopped by a 25-cent paper mask from Home Depot? Give me a break. Now, one of the other things I know is that as viruses mutate, they weaken. And we're all blessed with an immune system. And one way we become stronger, our immunity grows, is by being exposed to things. And our children wearing these masks has done nothing but make them sick. I had strep throat twice last year, and it was from wearing a mask. Didn't catch COVID, I was fine. All these people, I recognize that this virus has impacted certain communities, but never in the history of this country have we told healthy people to sit home, healthy people to mask up, healthy people to stay away, and our children. One of the miraculous things about this virus is that children were not affected. What did harm children was flu viruses. Flu viruses, they are 3 times more likely to impact children. We didn't close down a school, we didn't mandate vaccines, we didn't make people stay home, and we didn't force children to wear masks. It is illogical that we're doing that as adults. We are putting adult problems onto our children, and that is wrong. It was wrong at last March, and it's wrong today. With everything we know, there is 0 reason these schools should ever impose another restriction on these kids. It is wrong. It's child abuse, and it's criminal. They are children, and they need to live the way we grew up. We weren't exposed to adult issues. We went to school to learn. And parents trusted that when we sent our children to school, they were being taken care of and being taught. And being taught values and math and reading and history, not garbage, not social activism. We need our kids to live the way we remember living, not this pseudo-scientific crap that's being forced down their throats. It's inhumane. It's wrong. And you guys were elected. You absolutely were elected, and I recognize that you devoted an enormous amount of time to this. But you have to remember who you represent. You represent us and our children, not the teachers, not the teachers' unions. You have to do what's right for these people here. We're the ones who want to know what the curriculum is going to be. We're the ones who want to know what our children are being exposed to. Enough is enough. Start remembering who put you here and work for us. You have to protect these children. The lockdowns are coming again. Pritzker's wearing a mask at every single press conference. It's just a matter of time. Our children need to be protected from this. Be the adults. Be the grown-ups. Our health is our issues. Absolutely. Stand up for these kids and stand up for their parents. You guys are supposed to be our voices. We right. And these kids need you more than anything. Do the right thing. Take the masks off of them and let them be children. Let them go to school and learn. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's make sure the mic is working again. Is it working? Okay, thank you, sir. State your name, please.
Hi, my name is Tim Hendricks. I am the chairman for the Joliet Township Republican Organization. I am also the vice chairman for the Will County Republican Central Committee. I come here today representing both my organization and the county in saying that I'm looking here and I see 12 members sitting around these tables, and of the 12, I see 3 of the members wearing a mask. Is it safe to say that the members that are not made a conscious decision today for their health? They came in and they decided that they didn't need it? Am I safe to say that? Would everybody in the room agree with me? Okay. Or maybe they're vaccinated and they feel comfortable with that. Maybe some of you aren't and you decided not to wear a mask and you're not vaccinated. That's not for me to ask you, and frankly, I don't care. At the end of the day, what the significant difference is here is we as human beings and as Americans have the right to make our own choices. Every parent in this room has the right to make the choice for their children. Every grandparent that is trusted with the care of their grandchildren have the right to make the decision for their grandchildren. Every person in this room who is tasked with taking care of a child should be able to make those decisions for that child. I respect the school board. I respect the superintendent, the principals, everybody who goes to work every day. God knows it's not a job that I want. Taking care of thousands of children all day long is nothing but taxing, and I get that and I respect that wholeheartedly. But at the end of the day, the decision of what goes on with our children's health and safety and what we take into consideration with all of those things resides with these individuals in this room. We respect you. We respect the decisions that you need to make. I will not sit by when people say, if you don't like the decisions they're making, homeschool your kids. Take them out of school. Let's remember, we pay into the schools too. And let's remember, we have a right to send our kids here just like everybody else. If you want them to wear a mask, let them wear a mask. If they don't want to wear a mask, they have the right not to wear a mask. If they want to get vaccinated, get vaccinated. Nobody is stopping you. And if you don't want to get vaccinated, no one has the right to force you to get vaccinated. Now, I understand that each one of you guys have to stand up here and listen to countless of these kind of things, I'm sure. And we thank you from the bottom of our hearts that you are here and that you are doing it and that you are willing to participate. It is a very thankless job, and I thank you. And I know this room is thankful for you guys every single day. Please remember as the school year starts, these kids that we're talking about, and we use the big K word, kids, children, they all have faces, they all have names, they all have identities. They have friends groups, people that they know, people that they're trying to reconnect with after a very long year. They deserve to do that normally. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Good evening, sir. Could you state your name, please?
Yeah, my name is Mike Dean. I have 3 grandsons, three grandkids. They'll probably be coming to Joliet. And I was listening to the say-so. I am a Vietnam vet. Did you ever hear the word Agent Orange? Has anybody ever heard of Agent Orange? I mean, when you really go back to it, that chemical is still in our blood. Is it in my blood? I go to see the doctor. I don't know. When they put the shot in me, I says, give me the shot. I'll take that shot for my grandkids, for anybody else. I am 70 years old. I says, I'll take that shot, so if I get a third head or something happens to me, that's fine. I only got maybe 10 more years to live, maybe 5, I don't know. But I want these kids, and what I miss the most when they put on this mask, it's in every society, it's in every language, is the smile. I don't see it anymore. I see a little anger with parents that want everybody to wear a mask. I believe in pure, you choose. Choose what you want to do. You're the parent. That's what society was based on. Not the government. When you look at the government and what they're doing to us, the people, and when I read the Constitution, it says, "We the people," not we the government, like Biden said. And I got that off of CNN, not Fox News. I just love this country so much, and I see what's happening to it. Even though I was in Vietnam and they spit at me, called me a baby killer, you named it, went for a job, and I'm not going to tell you because of the skin color of my, the color of my skin, what at that time they had affirmative action and I had to go to the bottom, but I never let it bother me. This is a beautiful country. I've seen other countries and what they do to people. I was in Cambodia and Pol Pot. I saw what they did to anybody over the age of 11. It's still in my heart. But when you see kids wear a mask and you don't see that smile or the wave, where's our society going to? I'm in firm belief, I'm listening to all these mothers up here. And even the one mother that wants everybody to wear a mask, that is her decision. But now it'll be up to your decision. What's going to happen with these kids? And I hope you make the right decision. And I always leave a podium with, God bless America. I mean, the land of the free, and let us be free. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, sir. If you could state your name, please.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Ernest L Ray. I have been a resident of Joliet for about 23 years now, and I'm here tonight for Joshua. Joshua started in the public school here at age 3. I took him to school here just across the way to Marycrest day after day and watched him struggle and fight and try to become one of the kids. As I take him to the parks, I see the same things. And I said to myself, when I saw all this child abuse started taking place, I said, somebody's got to say something. I pastored an inner city church for 15 years. I've seen this behavior that we're talking about, this socialistic, domineering behavior. I spent a month in the Soviet Union in 1980. I watched people line up for bread. I watched people go to the Baraska stores to buy simple things like deodorant, blue jeans, soap. You couldn't go to those stores if you weren't a card-carrying communist, which at that time was only about 2.5% of the people in the Soviet Union. They couldn't buy shampoo. In fact, the tourists used to bring it in and sell it for $25 a bottle and finance their trip to the Soviet Union. From Leningrad to Moscow down to Uzbekistan and back to Kiev, all I saw was poverty and oppression. Why? Because those free people didn't stand up. Somebody has to stand up. I've got 4 of my natural children and 2 adopted children. And I've told them since they were just tiny, a man that won't stand for something will fall for anything. And I've been watching people fall for this farce this past year. I'm 71 years old. I've taken vaccine after vaccine. I've had vaccines that nobody in this room has probably had. If anybody's had yellow fever, just raise your hand. I had to take that. I had to go to the health department just to get it. Cholera, diphtheria, took all of those. Those were vetted. They were experimented on animals. You know, every animal they've used to experiment with this virus or this vaccine has died. Every single animal. Now, if you're If you're an atheist, then of course you would put yourself in that group. I'm not an animal. The Bible said God created me after his own image. Psalms 127 says, if the Lord don't keep your house, you're laboring in vain. If the Lord does not watch the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. We need more of Jesus, not vaccine. And what we get with Jesus is a boldness and a willingness to stand against oppression, and that's what we're seeing forced upon us. I've been to work every day. I'm 71 years old. Every day I visit people, I visit the sick, I visit the hospital. I thank the Lord I haven't had a cold in the past year. I'm not against vaccines. If you want to take an untried, untested, unexperimented vaccine and stick it in your arm, you go right ahead. People do that with heroin every day. You can't do that to my children. Joshua, let's get back to him. His mother, she was going to come with me, and she couldn't, because when you get a hip replacement, it's kind of difficult sometimes to go out. She's been wanting to fight for John. I'm going to read you a little bit of what she said. Hello, my name is Nora Bennett. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today because I'm a mother of, in my opinion, the most important student, my Joshua Bennett. I hope to briefly explain my dilemma. Now, her dilemma is your decision in regards to my son returning to school. Joshua has autism and has since 18 months old. I've had to make so many difficult decisions for him because he cannot sufficiently speak for himself. Oh, he's not going to be bullied? I grew up in the Chicago school system. If you're in any way different, you're going to be bullied. I don't care if you're in a classroom with all autistic children.
Sir, I don't mean to cut you off, but that is the 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your service.
Thank you so much.
Board, we appreciate it.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else that wants to speak? Please come up, sir. Good evening, sir. If you'd state your name, please.
Yes. My name is Archie Gavin Jr. I'm a lifelong resident of Joliet, Illinois, named after Pops. I had a lot of things I wanted to say on my way here, but after hearing everybody, Mr. Superintendent, how many students are there in Joliet Township 204? How many? Roughly?
About 6,800.
6,800. So you have 6,800 kids you have to look after every day. There's roughly 177 days in school year, about right? 180. Every day, 6,800 kids. Your kids. Some of the kids I know. What I was going to say, I threw out the window after listening to people talk. The veterans, I thank you for your service. Okay, that spoke. We have to come to a happy medium here. We got people who want to wear masks, we want people who don't want to wear masks. Do we have a COVID team in the district? Is there a team that just deals with COVID? I mean, is there an overall team in 204? It's just a question. I think if the district started a team with administrators, school boards, and parents, I think we could come to a happy medium. I'm also an elected official, okay? Tim, I've known you for a long time. How did we meet? We were taking care of kids, weren't we? I met Tim through my wife. My wife sits on the city council of Joliet. But we were taking care of kids. Our first job taking care of those kids were their public safety. same as these people. Their second job is to be educators. So as you offhand them, they get out your car or get off the bus, their first thought is their public safety when they walk into these buildings. Then their secondary job is education. We need to come to a happy medium. Whatever your opinion is your opinion. If I agree or disagree, I'm not going to talk past you, I'm going to talk to you. How do we come up with a solution that fits 6,800 kids? Because right now, we're talking past each other. We ain't coming up with a solution. Now, I'm going to ask a question. You don't have to answer it. Who in this room has had COVID? Was it a mild case or was it a serious case? In the last 4 months, I've buried 8 family members. And in this room, I know of one person that I infected. I infected 3, including my wife. My wife's a cancer survivor. So you see the optic that we're looking through? This is not easy. It really, so I think if we got board, administrators, and parents, and we talk to each other, I think, because we need solutions, because I'm for having the schools open, but I don't ever want to see anybody get sick with this disease, because this disease is killing people. It's killing people. So I mean, it is. No, yes, ma'am.
Sir,
But I'm just listening to what I've heard, trying to come up with a solution.
sir, could you please direct your statements to the board? We can't have a
You know,
question and answer
okay.
with the.
But if we could come up, I'm just throwing out an idea. Board, administrator, parents, to try to get the heat of this down so those 6,800 kids can be safe every day. Thank you for your time and thank you for your job.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other person here in attendance that would like to speak before we close this part of our meeting? Okay, on behalf of the board, we would like to thank all of you for attending here tonight. All of your comments were taken by the board. They will be in conversation with amongst us and the superintendent, and I assure you that we heard and we listened to everything that you told us tonight. So thank you for being here. Okay, we will move on to our next item. It will be the consent agenda. Motion to approve A through F. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Second. Any questions or comments? Roll call?
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn? Yes. Mrs. Guerrero Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Scrupa?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Okay, for the previous motion, we're now going to remove our recognition and awards. For A, Central Campus, we have no recognitions this month. For West Campus, we have no recognitions this month. And for District, we have a proclamation to JTHS School Board from Will County Executive Jennifer Bertino-Tarrant.
Hello, good afternoon, or good evening. Thank you for having me here today. Picked a good night, but it's probably a very timing one, because as we are talking about COVID, I am here to thank you for your leadership during the past year. I too have a child here who attends Joliet West, and I am proud of the work that you are doing. Thank you for all your service, because you do not work here, you volunteer, so thank you very much. So today I'm here on behalf of Will County, the County of Will Executive Proclamation honoring Joliet Township High School District 204 for support and operating the COVID-19 vaccine clinic at Joliet West High School. Whereas at the beginning of the novel coronavirus pandemic, at the end of 2019, there was a great need for information and solutions. And whereas with the Joliet Fire Department, the Will County Health Department, Amita St. Joseph Hospital, and the Joliet Township High School District 204 quickly came together to set up a vaccination clinic for educators as soon as the vaccine was available to protect teachers and school staff who would be returning to school. And whereas in February 2021, through this partnership, a clinic was set up at Joliet West High School staffed by numerous volunteer nurses, firefighters who dedicated more than 13,000 hours to offer this life-saving vaccine to Will County teachers and school staff. And whereas the success of this clinic allowed for its continued operation and expansion of vaccine accessibility to the general public, resulted in the administration of more than 60,000 first and second dose vaccines to residents of Will County, and further protected the public safety. Now therefore be resolved that I, Will County Executive Jennifer Bertino Tarrant, do hereby offer my sincere appreciation to the Joliet Township High School District 204 Board, Administration, and staff for leadership and support in coordinating this vaccine clinic to help Will County mitigate the COVID-19 crisis, dated this 20th day of July, 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You know,
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
I would just like to say on behalf of the Board of Education, thank you for your presence here tonight and for this proclamation. Also, thank you for all of your assistance that you have offered to our district and our community of Will County in an effort to try to fight this pandemic. And so we thank you as well for your cooperation with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, we will now move on to our superintendent reports.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our first presentation tonight is Student Support Services and Educational Environment Update. And we have Mrs. McDonald and our SB Dwarn.
Hi.
Good evening. Tonight's presentation is in regards to student support services and educational environment presentation update. So I wanted to let the board know that this presentation, the original presentation was given in December of 2019, and then we went March 2020 we paused because of COVID. Today's presentation is an update of where we are in regards to our professional development related to our educational environment. I want to start off with our district mission and diversity statement and highlight a few words for the board as we go into the presentation. So the words community, commitment, inclusive community, respects the humanity of all people. Those are key words that stick out to me and how it ties into the culture and community of our buildings. As we know, what we do, the decisions that we make are driven by our strategic plan, which includes our objectives, our mission statement, our diversity statement, and so forth. As a reminder to the school board, we have 4 objectives. So every student will meet and exceed our growth targets measured by classroom, district, and standardized assessments. We hope our graduation rate, our goal is to have our graduation rate 90% or higher. And you can see by the year 2018, this is outdated, and we will be moving into strategic planning this summer 2022 because we had to pause because of COVID.
So making sure that our students maintain and develop an individual career plan. And for those that don't know what an ICP is, that's their post-secondary plan for when they leave our buildings. And then all our students will consistently demonstrate the character attributes of confidence, compassion, responsibility, tolerance, respect, integrity, and perseverance. Our district believes, and I feel like I should read those, that we believe that every human being possesses inherent worth, that individuals are responsible for their own actions. The diversity of our district, our community strengthens and enriches our society. High expectations positively influence performance. Empathy, honesty, integrity, and respect are essential in building and maintaining mutual trust. And a safe environment is essential for every individual, and high-quality schools are essential to the quality of life for the whole community. These are the words that we live by. These are the decisions that we use. This is our guidance as we make decisions, which are outlined also in our parameters. So in the previous presentation from 2019, the two goals that were provided by Dr. Guzman, Dr. Gibson, and Mr. Hallahan were related to student academic performance and improving student behavior and social emotional competencies. Tonight's presentation is just where we are with the improvement of our climate and culture within each of our buildings. So I want to emphasize that there are three components as we talk about the climate and culture of our building. The first one is to continue implicit bias training of all staff, and that's related to strategies 6.2, excuse me, 6.2 and 6.4. And for those who don't know what those strategies are, I have that in front of me. So 6.2 is JTHS will create and implement a family and community group that aggressively builds relationships between District 204 families and staff in order to enhance the educational experience of all students. Strategy 6.4, JTHS will implement professional development that will result in staff demonstrating ownership of practices that enhance the academic and social emotional advancement for students of color. So continue implicit bias of all staff members. The four components is about building our cultural competency. So continuing a fourth year cultural responsive cohort for this upcoming school year. Continue to work with our cultural coaches who were trained by our equity coaches or consultants, excuse me. Continue to implement culturally responsive component to new teacher training. Implement a culturally responsive track as part of our 4-year induction program for new teachers, and to continue our restorative practices training. So I want to start off with the component regarding implicit bias. So we'll continue with our implicit bias training of all staff members and an expansion into student groups. The training is provided by our community member and parent, Troy Cicero. So he'll continue to train our staff. We had to pause because of COVID, so we'll continue with the training and we'll expansion into identified student groups. The cost for this training is estimated at $30,000, and that would be funded out of our Title I grant. Another component to build the culture and community is to build our cultural competency. So we will be continuing with our 4th cohort beginning this fall, working with our partners, educational equity consultants, so Phil and Billy. Really excited to have them back working with our staff. We'll offer a 2-day retreat in October, and we'll have follow-up sessions throughout the school year. That cost is estimated at $28,000 and is funded through our Title I grant. To further build the cultural competency of our staff, the trainers, the culturally responsive, our equity consultants trained a group of teachers and staff members and administrators last summer, so last August, September,
and we reference them as now our culturally responsive coaches. This team is facilitated by Corinne Zimmerman, Shelley Clark, and Steve Sieber, and they will continue to provide additional professional development into the upcoming school year. Another component to build our cultural competency is to continue with our restorative practices training. The training is provided by Sarah Bast-Warren, who's here with me today, and also Alma Dezanik-Bass. And just for the board's history, because we've had presentations by administrators. So Dr. Gibson and Mrs. Challey several years ago attended the Loyola cohort in regards to restorative practices. And Sarah Bast-Warren was one of those teachers, and we immediately connected with her, and we brought her in several years ago to start working with our district and our counselors and our deans about restorative practices. And since then, the relationship has been wonderful, and the impact on our school district has been positive. Through Sarah Buss's, and she goes by SB, SB's partnership with other people through Loyola. That's how we brought in Alma Dezanik-Bass, who's been working with Mr. Brett Markham, Takara Parker, and Mr. John Randich in working with our deans and counselors. Both of those partnerships will be funded through Title IV. So I asked Sarah Buss to come in and give the board an overview of what next year could look like. Alma lives in Phoenix, so I provided a couple pictures for the board. Alma and her husband just had a baby, so I know she wished she could be here in person, but I thank her for the services that she's provided thus far. So I'm going to turn it over to SB, and she's going to give us a brief outline of what it's going to look like this upcoming school year as we work with our different cohorts of staff members.
Thank you.
It's so wonderful to be back. I'm so happy to see all of you, and really thrilled to be moving into this third year together in partnership. It's been a very fruitful one, and it has been a real joy to be able to work with the incredible staff and faculty at JT. So I'd love to share with you a 3-point plan that follows the core pillars of my organization, which are professional learning for all staff, support of school-wide teams, and customized coaching for administrative and discipline leads. And I'm hopeful that it's this work, coupled with the foundation that we've already laid, that will advance this community into a more restorative school, a school that focuses on connection before compliance, a school that focuses on restoration before retribution or punishment. And so I'd love to share a little bit about the way, before I go into to this year's scope of professional learning, to talk a little bit about this past year and the way in which the work that we've done together has laid the foundation for what we're about to do in this year to come. The last year was very much about the why of what we're doing. You know, why restorative practices? Why social and emotional learning? How does this support the community? And we focused through a broad-based approach where heterogeneous groups of staff and faculty were brought together in combinations that they otherwise would not have been, to sit in virtual rooms together and have discussions about issues that mattered, issues that connected them to their why, issues that connected social and emotional learning to mental health, restorative practices to trauma-informed practices, and then moving on into helping them to understand the statement that this board set out almost a year ago, and understanding the basis of this work in anti-racism work. And so we've done a really robust job in helping folks to understand the why of this work. And so now we move into the how. Well, how do we go about doing this? How do we go about changing culture? And so because the how has so much to do with an individual's position within the school building, within the context that they do their work in, the professional learning for this year, rather than being a mixture of folks, will be tracks that are differentiated by stakeholder group, by the context in which staff and faculty situate themselves. So you can see these categories of staff members all have separate tracks of training that align both the language, the skills, and the knowledge across the district, but differentiated based on the context in which they'll operate. So security officers and focusing on hallways and entries and egresses, whereas classroom teachers will, of course, be focused on classroom community. And that work will all be customized to JT's individual language and needs. And will be attentive to the scope of that particular stakeholder group in terms of the way that that PD will be delivered. For example, teachers and parapros are the largest group, and so we are taking the approach of a train the trainer, and academy coordinators and curriculum directors will be facilitating that training that I will create. And so on and so forth, kind of differentiating to each of these customized tracks. The second pillar focuses on teams. Teams is where, I'm sure you all know, culture lives and accountability lies. And so it's Alma Janic-Bass and I will both be focused on different teams. Her work will largely focus on counselors and social workers and also deans, where she and I will overlap a bit with the deans, and focusing on large school-wide teams that take a look at data, both school-wide data and student-level data, in order to make data-informed decisions to support every child. And we are also coordinating and collaborating with the multi-tiered systems of supports process that Joliet is layering in a very intentional way this year. And so the focus of this teamwork is to establish goals and reach those benchmarks. Finally, it has been a great good fortune to be able to work with the people in front of us here. And so a lot of the work that has been that I've been doing in the past will continue with district and building leadership. And Alma has really enjoyed her connection with the Director of Student Support Services, with Brett Markham, and will continue to do so, and also with Takara and JR. And so we hope with these various pillars of work to attend to both the individual and group needs of just about every member of the school community, because we know every adult who is in the building is tasked with building relationships with young people. So thank you so much for allowing me to come here. It's been, I've had a kind of a year gap for obvious reasons, but really grateful to be continuing this work with all of you.
What questions do you have for us?
I have a question. So is the training like at the beginning of the school year, or is there ongoing? 'Cause
Ongoing.
Okay, so I know that there was a talk of, at the end of the last school year about restorative practices in the classroom, how they implemented. Will teachers also be giving like of how it's gonna be looking this year in their classroom with the restorative practice? Because I know a lot of teachers had a lot of questions.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
So I asked if teachers will be given training of what it's going to look like in the actual classroom with restorative practices, because I know I've been asked like by teachers, when's it happening, what's it going to look like, and there's still questions about it.
So that's a really good question. We have Institute Day. We have 2 days dedicated to the opening of the school year. 4 hours of that Institute Day will be dedicated for professional development for teachers and deans and the parapros that will be in the same room, like starting to fill their toolbox. And then subsequent school improvement days, so we'll have 4 school improvement days, so that's 8 hours first semester, and then 3 school improvement days dedicated to second semester, so that's 6 will be dedicated to that as well. So we'll kick it off with 4 hours during Institute Day, and then ongoing support through our school improvement days.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Skrupa.
Yes. Consultants are very expensive for the district. Do we have a program that's going to be implemented to do like a train the trainer?
Yep.
So we could, eventually wean off and we could do our own training within the district?
Correct. So the equity consultants, so Phil and Billy, they train to actually a group of staff members last school year, and our goal is that we take ownership of that after the team is ready. So they're going to work with cohort number 4 this year, but our goal is eventually, I'm hoping next year, that they can start their own cohort. So yeah, the answer is yes. Same with SB and Alma. They are helping us set up our systems. This is, there is a limited amount of capacity with our leadership team into developing this restorative classroom, restorative community. So our goal is that, again, we're training our trainers. So we're training our curriculum directors, we're training our academy coordinators, our deans have been trained, our counselors have been trained, and then now we're training our teachers.
And then, just to add to that, some of that began last year. We had the 16 individuals that went through the trainer model, and they did tracks throughout the year. They led book studies, and so some of that already began. And so those 3 individuals, Corinne Zimmerman, Steve Sieper, and
Shelley
Clark, who's here, they are meeting, I think, actually this week and talking about what next year looks like too.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
If we could, please, just before the next presenter, if we could just take a 5-minute recess, if any of the board members need to use the facilities or anyone before the next group of presenters, that would be appreciated. Thank you. How long we on break? Just 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Just use the washroom itself.
How many are here?
12, the rest of them.
Okay. Oh, wait, hold on. We're streaming.
Bringing in reinforcements, yeah.
They all want to come and see what's going on.
What's going on, right, yeah.
So happening.
Yeah, sure,
Well, hey, at least nothing else. The accident's been cleared, so you got
Yeah.
a free shot going home.
Yeah.
I guess they had it backed up down 80. And
Oh, did they? Wow. I think we're gonna have to get a different type of mic.
Oh, it's,
Maybe something similar.
it's not,
I think we probably get something similar to this. That one. It's on, but it goes on and off. It's on.
test, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Touch.
As if you're back here.
Bass. You can hear it.
But right now you can, yeah, right. Yeah. Back here you can?
Yeah, you
I
can
got a
hear
little bit of a deeper voice, so I carry it a little better, but. Right, it depends on the voice.
Yeah.
What? Yeah, you were loud enough, but I mean, if somebody's a little bit soft speaking, it might, or if they're standing back, or they might
I
not.
wonder if there's, can you guys hear me now? Okay.
Can you?
How about closer? Now?
Yeah.
Okay.
It starts right around here, somewhere around here it starts.
Let's see if there's a different type of mic we can get. We'll see if there's a different type of mic we can get.
Yeah,
I'm sure it
some
is.
people just, they go back and they're pulling back. and
There's
it's just-
people moving it up and down and moving.
This thing's super sensitive, yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. We might have to be something like this, where we just turn it on and it will just pick up anything.
Yeah.
Take your time.
All right, we will get back to our next presenter, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next presentation is prevention of and response to bullying, intimidation, harassment. We have Mrs. Jo Wooten, assistant principal from West, who worked with Mr. Steve Locke to put this presentation together. This is an annual presentation that we do for the board.
Good evenings. Mr. Locke, he's the assistant principal at Joliet Central, was unable to be here tonight. However, we did have an opportunity within the last couple months to review our harassment, intimidation, and bullying cases for the school year 2021.
Hold on, Ms. Wooten, 1 minute. Ladies and gentlemen, if we have a presenter, if you're going to have any conversations, could you please take them outside into the hallway? Thank you so much. Proceed.
Thank you. The bullying, harassment, and intimidation policy is to be reviewed annually with input from a student, teacher, and parent advisory committee. Due to last year and working through COVID, we did not convene a committee for last school year. However, our policy does require a prevention plan, a response plan, and evaluation and assessment of the policy's outcome. Listed on the slide above here is the numerous ways in which our district provided prevention information for our students, staff, and community this past school year. Yearly then, our committee does review all of the data surrounding victimization, the observations of students, staff, and families of safety at school. We look at the areas in each of the school buildings to see where bullying is taking place. We look at the type of bullying that is used, and we collect all of that information, as well as we look at bystander intervention or participation. Our data from last year, August of 20 through May of 21, we had 4 cases of HIV that were reported. 2 of those cases were founded. Locations for last year, and being of course that we were mostly remote, all of the cases were electronic. I do want the board to know though that we do have many more cases of, I would say, poor behavior from students, but they don't rise to the level of repeated ongoing bullying. They're taken care of in one, I guess you'd say, one conversation with the dean or the guidance counselor, social worker. It's taken care of and student progresses back to class, as well as we take care of who might have been the student who was bullied at that point. But it doesn't rise to the level of a bullying case, which is repeated over time. So for this year, we actually had 2 students. One was founded for the basis of sex, and the other one was founded for basis of race, sexual orientation, and sex. So it was really 2 students with the 4 cases. Once a case does come forward, we do follow a response plan. Once the case, as I said, once we get into our response, the investigation begins immediately when that case is reported, and it has to be completed within 10 days. Within the 10 days, all parties are notified and guardians are contacted to discuss the findings and actions taken. Often though, these happen, well, probably 99% of the time, the investigation and the response begins on the very first day it's reported, and actually within the first hours. It usually does not go over 10 school days unless something happens over a school break, but even then, administration does get involved in those cases and reaches out. Once we've reached out and we've figured out whether it is a bullying case, we then develop what is called a response plan. The response plan is developed for students and is in fact much longer. The response plan may include support services within the district or community. Oops, went too quick. Recommendations for the 21-22 school year, being that we did not have our advisory committee, our recommendation is to actually convene the committee in the last quarter of the school year. Therefore, we'll be able to pull the data for the complete school year, as well as with our parents, students, teachers. We'll be able to look at what recommendations need to change within that policy for our students and our staff. And then for the board, is there any questions?
I have a question.
As well as all of our students on their platforms, they have a bullying site where they can click into it and they can report. So they can report for their friends, they can report for themselves. And in addition to that, many of our students do just share with a trusted adult. They will share with their teachers, coaches, and coaches then will help them facilitate to fill out the form and all the information we might need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presentation is the Suicide and Depression Awareness and Prevention presentation. This in the past was a presentation in the middle of the school year that really didn't make sense, so that's why we're moving it to the summer so we can look at the full year. And our presenters are J.R. Randich and Takara Parker, our PPS coordinators.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Guzman. That was a suggestion that was made January, I believe. So some of this information, I probably should have said prior to that, we do realize we have 2 new board members, so we are going to use basically the same presentation with some updated information. All right. So Takara, I believe, is going to start us off.
Good evening. It's so nice to be here this evening to address you and share information about our suicide, depression, awareness, and prevention policy. We're here to share information in accordance with our policy 7290, which ensures that suicide, depression, awareness, and prevention policy is reviewed by an advisory committee annually and is shared with the board. This policy was adapted in acknowledgement of the district's commitment to maintain a safe school environment by doing the following: protecting the health, safety, and wellness of our students, welfare of our students, promoting a healthy development and amongst our students, understanding the significance of the impact of mental health issues and their effect on our school community, providing a safeguard against the threat or attempt of suicide among school-aged children, and ensuring that the school personnel and students are educated and provided with the necessary resources to prevent and to promote mental well-being. And we also want to provide resources for students and parents and guardians. The work of the committee of the Suicide and Prevention Advisory Committee is comprised of administrators, social workers, and counselors who meet periodically over the course of the school year to review, to revise, and create procedures that would support and guide practices for our policy. They ensure the data that is collected is accurate and review any new mandates or initiatives that are related to suicide prevention, as well as all procedures that are associated with our policy in order to recommend changes. So these are the statistics for the past 5 years.
Okay, the first few slides will be from school year 1920 and 2021. Going into this school year will be my third year co-leading the efforts with Takara. This will be Takara's second year. So much of the information from the next few slides we'll compare 1920 to 2021. So in 1920, school year 1920, there were 43 reports from Central and 23 reports from West. This slide shows data by race and gender. It should be noted that we actually have 4 campuses. So while much of this information will be about West and Central, we also have our transition campus and we have our Pathways campus. And here is the information, the data for 2021. So Central Campus had 19 reports, West had 8 reports, just roughly about double of what we reported in January. This one again is race and gender, and this is again for school year 2021. Okay, yeah, so thank you, Dr. Gibson. So these are just reports of ideations. These are reports, a friend of a student might report something to one of our guidance counselors, social workers, deans, any PPS member, teacher. We look into it, and there's more to the story. It really does take some time to dissect what's going on with the young individual, and those are what we report. This is not just joking around information. We really have some skilled individuals that really do ask some in-depth questions. Thank you, Dr. Gibson. Again, so this is 2021. All right, going to, so this is report outcomes. So this is the outcome of those reports that we showed in that first slide of 1920. Those 43 reports, 8 were referred to the social service of SAS, 13 were taken to the emergency room, sometimes by a parent, sometimes by paramedics. Joliet paramedics might come and help us out with that. And then 21 parents took their student to a mental health provider or the emergency room or other health facility. In school year 1920, it is sad to report that we did have 1 suicide at the Central Campus. So for the 1920 school year, here are those 23 reports that we reported on one of those first slides. From the West Campus, 3 went to the SAS referral, 5 emergency room, and 14 involved the parent taking him to a mental health provider or emergency room. Pathways did have 1 report, and the report outcome from that Pathways referral was a parent contact. School year 2021, the report outcome. So for the Central Campus, those 19 reports, we called 911 or, so with the COVID year, it actually came down to some situations where our social workers, our counselors, our deans actually had to do some of the interviewing through Zoom, through social media like that. And so we did have some incidences for school year 2021 where we actually felt our only option was to call 911. And so that's why it's reported this way here for school year 2021. Again, it was referred to earlier tonight that many of our students were on a remote schedule. So those are the reports for Central, and then those are the reports for West. Those 8 reports, we had 3 that called 911 or the police department. 4, the parent took the mental health provider, and 1 screening. I do want the board to know that we actually, we have really good police liaisons in our building. From what I can recall, for the 8 times there for the Central campus, every single one of them, we were able to reach out to our detective that's in our building. And if he just happened to be off for the day or whatever reason he couldn't help, immediately we got some assistance. So I just want the board to know that we have great support in that sense. Here's the 5-year comparison. I'll let you take a look at that for a minute. It is small, and I apologize. I'm going to make one note about that. We do realize that this indicates on the bottom right there, it is female. This is by year, so it's basically the last 5-year comparison. The females are, in most cases, double what the male reports are. That is something that Takara and I have talked about, and we are going to address that with our committee this year. That's going to be one of our focuses that we will discuss with that committee when we meet. Another thing I would like to point out from this is that in school year 16-19, I'm between 16-17 all the way through 18-19, we did have a situation where there was, I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. Anyways, the total report has gone down if you look at the total report there. So you do see that trend where it goes down. Okay, here is actually where I wanted to make that comment. So it was on this slide. What I wanted to show here is that if you look at school year 16-17 and school year 18-19, the vast majority of the outcomes were sent to the ER, all right? And if you look at the last couple years there, 19-20 and 20-21, there was an uptick involving the parent. And the point that we would like to make there is that it's just really, really been a focus of ours the last 2 years to really build that relationship with the parent and the family. And so what we have found through the committee work is that we needed to just have a form or a document where we could take our time and go through and work with students. And we felt like in years past it was kind of almost a little bit rushed. And so we streamlined that process a little bit, and it really does put the focus on involving the parent, getting them in, and helping us and them make a decision for that. So that was the note I wanted to make there.
So after the report of suicidal ideations, and there it does require some assistance from a mental health provider, when students do return to the school building, we do have an aftercare plan to ensure that they are supported in their transition back into the building. Students who are transitioning back into the school will have a reentry meeting that includes their counselor, their social worker, their parents, a hospital liaison, if available, and if it is applicable, their dean. A plan for providing social emotional supports to assist a student is developed, and from that point, the counselor will monitor the plan, ensuring that they check in with the student often to ensure that supports are being received, and if additional, also to look into if additional supports are needed for that student. In response to a suicide or a suicide attempt on campus, our crisis So ongoing work for this next school year, the committee will meet biannually to review, revise, and create procedures that will continue to support and guide practices for our School Board Policy 7290. The committee will plan future educational opportunities for students and for staff. The committee will review data and ensure that both campuses are keeping accurate information. The committee will discuss trends and review new mandates and initiatives that will make necessary recommendations to the school board if necessary. And the committee will continue to ensure that mental health information and services are provided to our families in their preferred languages. Any questions?
It says protecting the health, safety, and welfare of our students. Do we ever talk about that with the staff also, and especially after this year of like resources available to staff and how to address mental, health with staff? Because if staff isn't mentally well, it's going to affect their teaching, which affects students.
We have in the past. We've had counselors, social workers review the practice of how to report incidences to the PPS staff. We've done that in faculty meetings. We've shown them the paperwork that we would use to run through those interviews and things like that. Yeah, that's reviewed yearly.
I think you misunderstood my question of more like, is part of this committee at all like addressing like mental health of the staff?
Gotcha.
Not, I can help answer that. Not this particular committee, but we do presentations on the employee assistance program, update staff with that, so where they can get additional help. Also, of focus this year, and I know we talked to SB earlier, we did circles with staff, and some of the beginning circles this year were focused on, self-care, mindfulness, things that the staff could utilize to make sure they're in a good place. And that's something we would like to continue to do.
And I can add to that too. In one of the presentations that we had, we're embedding that resilient youth curriculum in our PE classes. And actually on Institute Day, we're going to teach one of the first strategies to all our teachers. So that way then they have that strategy to use with themselves and also the kids in the classroom. So the kids will be learning the strategies, but the teachers will be as well to practice with themselves. Because like mindfulness and even just doing some basic yoga is good for everyone. So that's something we're going to be embedding next school year.
My next question is, you already mentioned about how much higher the female rates are than the male rates. And are you guys working with the other committee of bullying, intimidation, harassment, like together on that preventative measures?
Yes.
And then, sorry, I have so many. So in your last question, it says, sorry, I lost my track of what. To ensure all mental health information services are available to families. Do you meaning just what you're doing with the families, or do you have like with COVID, we realize that parents rely a lot on the schools for mental health. Is there a place, and do parents know about it, to reach out and say, I think my child's having trouble. Do you have resources that are available in the community, and have that and say, here are the resources, here are some counselors, things like that?
Yes, so a couple things on that question. Good question. So our counselors have a counselor page. You guys have one at
Yes.
West? So we'll have a counselor page with resources on the website, number one. So they could just simply refer them there. In the moment when, I had talked about that relationship, one of the things we learned this past year is we actually probably increased our parent involvement by simply just using Zoom and modes like that. And prior to COVID, we didn't do that. We expected parents to come in. But while meeting with parents, our social workers and our school counselors are updating resources and actually have hard copies that they give them that they can actually physically take with them for community agencies and support in that sense.
Do we have it like, we make these announcements through the phone and try to get out to parents, but like sometimes as a parent, if you're not good at navigating the internet or something like that, that you might not know those resources are there. Because, I just was reading studies that, again, the
there, I guess, what I'm asking is there a way to push the information out more to parents versus just having it on the internet?
Probably, and we'll review that with our team. That is something we can look at this year. You know, Takara talked about the reentry meetings, and I've actually observed one of those, and the social workers just completely take their time with the parents and just make sure they have everything they need to move forward. So whether it's a resource, you know, school personnel that they can reach out to, whatever the parent really would need and help the student in that sense, they're really supporting it.
I'm thinking of more of like
including it in the newsletter?
Yeah, so
If I know my kid has a problem and I don't know where to go, like, can I call the school and get resources, community resources to get my kid help?
Yeah, yes, and then also, we do have mechanisms with the principal's email blasts or emails from me where we have put links in. There were several times this year we did that were specific to mental health. I know there was one email that was really focused on that and just different resources. So there's resources, and then we also have housed things on our website with links that are easier so that people don't have to hunt around. So we have mechanisms for doing that too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That was all.
Sorry, can I just say a couple things? I only know a little bit more because I did this again in January. And Mr. Markham, I know that you now have Shelley Clark, but they gave also a presentation on some of, and we're going to vote on, there's one of them tonight for guardian angel community services, but some of the network agreements that we have within the community, they're really good at utilizing those. I know that just because I worked at one of the agencies. And I just want to say also, when it comes to SAS and parent, I just think it's always important to share that SAS is through the CARES hotline, and that's only for children who don't have private insurance, or who don't have private insurance. That's something I hope that the state actually works on and envelops everybody, including kids who have private insurance. But I want to say it's really important that you've really just stepped up and included parents. That it's incredibly important and to continue to do that. But based on the January presentation and what Mr. Markham did and now bringing on Shelley Clark, I think all of those things working together are going to make your questions even more solidified and just help all of our students. So thank you for that presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next presentation, Mr. Markham, he will be doing two presentations for us. The first one is the update on our problem-solving circles. Then this has been an annual presentation.
Hello, everyone. You get to hear from me a lot tonight, so I apologize in advance. So some of the things that you're going to see, and I'm going to start with our problem-solving circles program. Solving Circles program. It was a result of a partnership with the Joliet Region Interfaith Education Council, or JREC, which we typically in non-COVID times facilitate here through the district. Historically, it's been offered only to students who are placed on expulsion, or what we now call behavior warning, as a way to help, again, in response to a behavior incident, bring them back into school and help them think through how to act differently if a situation arises in the future. This school year, we continued with the COVID protocols, so meetings occurred via Zoom, which actually, in talking to Greg Thompson, our dean who runs this process, is something, just as JR mentioned, that we hope to continue moving forward, because a lot of families are able to participate. It eliminates a barrier of transportation. He added Saturday meeting times as an option for families, and we extended the program into the first week of July to get through the students who were on our list. Obviously, something worth pointing out that will be a theme through both of my presentations is that the number of referrals were down because of our COVID protocols and mitigations and fewer students in the school. So a lot of data here. Again, the numbers were down. One positive for us this year is that we had 62 students. Is it 62 students? Let me make sure I got that. Yes, 62 students who were referred to Problem Solving Circles. They all completed the paperwork, and they all attended at least an initial meeting with Dean Thompson. So that's a huge success for us. We want to continue to see more families at least exploring the option and learning about the program. Ultimately, we had 49 families successfully complete the program. That's 79%, and that's about on average for what we've been doing in the last few years. Just a demographic breakdown. You see a high concentration in this year of sophomores and juniors. We typically do see this front-loaded freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. And then just for informational purposes, because this is something that we give annually, we always update the demographic breakdowns of the families referred for problem-solving circles. An important part of this, and again, our objective is to educate students and help them achieve their high school diploma. So we always focus on seniors in this. We had 9 seniors who began the process this school year. 5 of them graduated on time. 2 are going to return to finish their high school diploma next year, and 2, unfortunately, withdrew from JTHS. Dean Thompson, again, facilitates these circles. I'm up here talking to you about it. He does a large majority of the work, but he has a really strong group of volunteers. We have one here with us. Mr. Newby is a problem-solving circles volunteer, so we appreciate Mr. Newby, Dean Thompson, and his whole team for what they do to help our students and their families come back into our school environment more prepared to learn. Some historical data. I'm not going to read all of these numbers, but again, our successful completion rate is around 79–80%. So we were on par with that this year, despite the challenges that we faced with being remote and COVID. This program has helped 104 seniors graduate on time. And only of the 741 families who completed the process, only 66 since 2012, 2013 have been placed back on expulsion or behavior warning. And then also, I thought it was important to point this out and make sure that the whole team, but especially Dean Thompson, get their recognition. They received recognition from INSPRA for their distinguished service to our district, which is a huge honor for them. I don't think there's enough positive things that we can say about Dean Thompson and all of our volunteers, because this program really has made a significant difference in our school community, and it's something that, as you heard earlier, we're looking to expand beyond being reactive to being proactive now. So we're really excited about that process. Any questions about problem-solving circles?
As I look at the demographics, I see that there's still a high percentage of our minority students getting consequence, and it's still bothering me as we have spent so much money in our equity work. Like, why aren't we seeing improvement in the numbers?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point, a very fair question, and something that we talk about all the time, and it's going to continue to be something that we focus on, is doing better for our students who are overrepresented in our discipline data, right? I know that in my new role, working with JR and Takara, we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about how, and they started this last year, how, and the year before, how we respond when a student is proportionality after the deans and counselors and social workers went through SB's cohort. And so now when we move that to the teacher level, we're hoping that we see an equivalent drop in referrals to the office, which then over time we should see impact outcomes. So I share your frustration, and I think we all do, but it's going to take a little bit of time, but I think we're moving in the right direction now, and that outcome data from my presentation in June is something that I would point to as evidence of that.
To piggyback off of what Ms. Diff said, that when I'm looking up the Gillette Township racial diversity, 19% of the school is African American, but yet we have 50% here, and that's, or 47%, and 51% of our black boys, or 51%, and not all of them, but of that number, and that's highly concerning, and to say it's gonna happen slowly is, to me, not acceptable. Like, it needs to be like, it's very concerning that it's not representative of the school. And so when I look at what our school, the background is, our discipline should match that. And anything that's not that really is not acceptable. And so not just a slow move towards it, it needs to be a fast move towards our kids getting equal treatment.
Definitely, I think the pace is accelerating now. You know, it started with, Diane talked about the Loyola cohort that Dr. Gibson went through. That was the start of this process, and now that more people are being trained and we're increasing awareness, I think it will accelerate for sure. But I share your concern. We talk about how we're designated by the state in that for our disproportionate discipline, and it's something that we just have to do better on as a district. So I think we all agree on that.
I have a question. Our discipline committee, for every time a child has an infraction and it goes to that, are all of them, did they already go through SB's program?
The discipline committee, you mean the threat assessment team? Well, the threat assessment team is only when it's, a threat, like a major safety concern, so they wouldn't meet on every incident. But all of the deans and all of the counselors and social workers all went through the restorative practices training the first year. And then we all went through the basic awareness piece of how circles look this last year. But they did go through the in-depth training 2 years ago. They were finishing it up actually when COVID hit.
Okay. So now it's gonna be brought out to the teachers more?
Yes.
Yes. All of the community building and establishing shared agreements and how you interact with students, all is restorative practices, right? And it's, a lot of our teachers already do it innately. It's just how they approach interactions with their students. But now we're providing that explicit professional development for all of our staff.
And I'm wondering, like, when I look at what our school report card is and the percentages, and then I look at that, to me, as a community member, as a teacher, and as a parent, I find it very concerning. And I think it's really powerful to be able to share that with your staff also when you're doing this training of saying, look, this is a real problem.
And very good point, and I think it does, anybody who's in education is in it for kids, right? We want to help kids, and I think this data is a reminder of how we need to approach that. And I know that when we talked about multi-tiered systems of support, the principals and Diane did share some of this data, but that's a good point that you can't, the data is what's happening, so I think we need to make sure that we always keep that in the front of our minds.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions before Mr. Markham moves to the next presentation? Okay, so the next presentation is the annual Lincoln School presentation.
All right, so Lincoln School is a school run by the Regional Office of Education. It's I wouldn't call it completely an alternative school, but if you have a background in education and you think back to alternative schools, that's kind of how it started. It used to be called Premier Academy, and it's evolved into its current model. They run 2 programs for the Will County area. The first is the Regional Safe School Program. This is where we refer students in lieu of expulsion. It's an opportunity for them to continue with their education instead of being placed on expulsion and not having anywhere to go. Students are able to earn credits and work towards graduation. The other program they run is the Truant's Alternative and Optional Education Program, or what we call TAOP. This is for students who are chronically absent from school and are having issues getting to school. We've tried to work with the county truancy officers. We've tried to institute our own supports and remediations for students, and it's not working. So this is an opportunity for them, again, to try a smaller environment to find ways to be successful and earn credits. So in terms of the Regional Safe School Program from last year, it's a very small number of students, but again, this is just historical data that we share each year. We had 3 students continue in the RSSP program this year who were in lieu of expulsion from the year before, 1 junior and 2 seniors. In terms of the demographics of those students, there were 2 Hispanic or Latinx students and 1 white student in the RSSP program this year. And then we build this each year, but our graduation outcomes for RSSP students, and again, I would share that this is the alternative to the RSSP program is not being in school, right? So any success is good success. We've had 43 students since 2012, 2013 who have earned their high school diploma. 126, we don't have a record of them earning their diploma. I would just add the caveat that if a student has transferred out of the district, we may not have a record and they may have earned it somewhere. It would end up being reported for the school district that they conclude their high school enrollment in. And we have 59 students of 169 who have been referred who are still eligible to earn their diploma. They're serving out the end of an expulsion. They're currently enrolled at Joliet Township High School, or they were referred to the Early Leavers program at Joliet Junior College, where if they're very close to graduating, they can finish those credits. We were asked a few years ago about the racial demographics of the students who successfully complete and don't successfully complete their program. So this is something we've added to this presentation each year, and those are on there. So again, you see it here of the graduates and the non-graduates. Obviously, to Ms. Lynn's point, our Black or African American students are overrepresented, and that's a result of their overrepresentation or our disproportionate expulsion data. So again, something for us to focus on. But we really want to celebrate these 43 students who did earn that diploma. That's a huge accomplishment, but we can't forget that disproportionality is something we need to address. So the TAOP program this year, we had 14 students enrolled. With both programs, we did not send any new referrals this year as a result of our partnership with them and talking about how they were addressing remote learning and some of the additional opportunities that we implemented. We just didn't find a need. We had our own programs that we could use. So we had 14 students enrolled, 10 from Central and 4 from West. You see that huge drop off, but again, just because we had no new referrals. Of the 14 TAP students, there's 1 who's going to continue at Lincoln next year. 9 of them are back at Joliet Township High School. Their last step to re-enrolling is just completing their proof of residency. We had 1 student who returned and graduated on time, 2 qualified for early leavers, and then unfortunately we had 1 student who was dropped from Lincoln for non-attendance, and we were unsuccessful with contacting the family to get them to re-enroll. So again, the demographic breakdown. There's some similarity here to the presentation that Takara and JR made, where females are typically overrepresented in our TAOP program. I think that warrants some investigation. We started to see that level out, and then COVID. But I think we want to make sure that this program, or the opportunities we implement to support students and give them pathways to graduation, that it's available to all students, and figure out what the reason is for that disproportionality. No freshmen this year. Again, we typically see higher numbers of sophomores and juniors in this program because we want to intervene as early as possible. Once they hit senior year, they're past the compulsory education age, so we really want to try to address this as early as possible. And then we just started sharing this very recently, so this is the number of courses passed or credits earned. It's very small, so I apologize for that. We just break it down by content area, and our reasoning being that at Lincoln, they're earning Joliet Township High School credit, but they're using a program called Edgenuity, which is not our curriculum. So we just want to make sure that our students who are there, what they're experiencing is aligned to the way that our teachers are teaching them before they go to Lincoln, and so that they're set up for success when they come back. So this is data that we'll track over time to, see if there's content area that we need to work with Lincoln on their Edgenuity platform. So in the past, I know when I first started, we went over and we worked with them on their social studies curriculum because we weren't having students experience success, and we made some adjustments. And now social studies, as you can see, is aligned to the other content areas for most of our years. So just some points about the credits earned in each program. With both programs, we had fewer students and no new referrals, so that's why you see, again, that dip in credits earned. We do want to celebrate our students who graduated, are in early leavers, are back to us on campus on track. That's a huge success. I would point out in the Safe School program especially, 2 of our 3 students, one graduated, one came back. He was credit deficient when he was recommended for expulsion. He's coming back on track, so that's a huge success, and we're proud of him. And those are the kinds of meetings I like to have. On my next slide here, I'm going to show you the transition process. We meet with the families as students transition back, and so those are the types of meetings where it's very positive. A student took a negative experience and turned it into something where now he's going to graduate high school on time, most likely. So in those transition meetings, the Director of Strategic Partnerships, a dean, a JT counselor, a Lincoln counselor, the parent and the student all meet. They talk about the student's experience at Lincoln. They talk about interventions that Lincoln might have tried, their credits, their attendance, and they create a return plan. So that could include some of our interventions. It could include Dean Thompson's problem-solving circles, any sort of behavioral health team supports that they might need, and the parents and student are equal partners in that process. We also provide registration information to the families in that meeting. One of the things I identified early on is that we often have families that don't complete the registration process. So they come to the meeting, we talk about how we're going to help them come back in, and then there's issues with registering for school. We started to overcome that by registering them during the meeting when we were able to have them on campus. That's something that I'm sure Ms. Clark will continue in the future. We did these via Zoom this year, so that our efforts to address that are just continual communication from multiple offices in the district. But that's something for us to keep an eye on. And again, we offer all of our students now in both programs the opportunity to participate in problem-solving circles, because Dean Thompson, in addition to addressing behavior concerns and identifying those root causes, is now working with our students who have attendance concerns. So we've expanded that program for attendance. Any questions about Lincoln School?
I have a quick question. The 43 students who graduated since 2012, 2013, did they come back into Central or West, or was this graduation mostly at Lincoln School?
No, that's a good question. More often than not, they come back to us and finish with us, right? Okay. So we had the one student this year that I'll use as an example because it was this year. He finished his credits at Lincoln. He was recommended for expulsion during his junior year, and so it just worked out that he was able to finish at Lincoln. But typically, they get back on track at Lincoln School and then return to us and graduate.
If you were to put a percentage, how much percentage come back to us and graduate?
I don't want to lie to you, so I can look into that and get it to you for sure. But
I was just looking for a ballpark.
Yeah. I mean, I would say the majority of them do return back to us to finish their requirements.
So Brett, I think it was last year, we discovered that Lincoln has the autonomy to decline any student that is referred, and if we have expelled them and Lincoln denies them, have we looked into that, where I think we still have a responsibility for that student getting educated somewhere? Have we looked into that?
Yeah, so obviously COVID put a pause on all that, but I know that that's a priority for us to look at. I know that As far as how Lincoln School accepts students, we can't control. That's part of our agreement with the Regional Office of Education, is that they have the autonomy to, if they feel like a student could pose a threat to their safety and security of their staff and their students, they can say no. I know that at one point, ISB was talking about legislation to address, in lieu of expulsion, students receiving remote education. That was pre-COVID, so I don't know where that's at. But it's definitely something that I know we look at all the time, and is a concern. You don't want students to just be expelled and out there with no options, right? Because then that spills into the community and causes more negative outcomes.
Thank you.
So I was looking at who is it your return to school plan, or like,
The meetings, the
yeah. And I don't see teachers as part of that team, and to me, that's an essential part, because they're the ones in the classroom with the students. And I've been at meetings where they make, just do this in the classroom, and you're like, well, how is that going to look? And I'm curious to why teachers are not part of the students returning to the school.
Yeah, so those transition meetings happen at the end of either the semester, or most often they go until May. We have a few students who return in January, but most return for the following school year. And we don't know at that point who their teachers are going to be when they come back. Part of the meeting is to identify which classes they're going to be in. And so it would be, in order for us to have teachers, I think we would be pulling potentially past teachers who they may have had 3 semesters ago, or guessing at which classes they might need.
I personally still think it's an important part, because as someone that's in the classroom educating, like the strategies and things that we use, that we should have teacher input on how this plan is going to be implemented into the classroom. Like they're the person in charge of educating the student, but they're not part of the return plan.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something for us to look at, for sure. I should mention that part of what the Lincoln counselor brings is their report from the Lincoln teacher. But we'll definitely look at that. That's a good question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Our next presentation is from Dr. Hampton. He is going to provide an update on the elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund, ESSER2, as well as the American Rescue Plan.
Yes, good evening to everyone. As Dr. Guzman just mentioned, ESSER2 and the ARP, or the American Rescue Plan, are funds that have been provided through the federal government through the state. And before I even talk about ESSER2, you may ask about, well, what about 1? So ESSER 1 essentially began March 2020 through September of 2021. So actually that grant period ends this September. And Brett has been working on that grant, and we're just about complete with those expenditures. So as it relates to ESSER 2, I'll let Brett start, and then we'll tag team this presentation.
I told you were going to hear from me a lot today. So in terms of ESSER 2, in my new role, one of the things that I'm taking on here is the management of our ESSER funds and our ARP funds. So our allocation for ESSER 2 from the state was $4.55 million. It runs from March 13th of 2020, so we can backdate expenditures through September of 2023. And again, the focus is on returning students to school, making sure that we're updating our HVAC systems, that we have a safe environment, that we're supporting any of the social emotional needs that may have arisen out of the pandemic, whether it's trauma from loss of family members or a lack of access to resources to address mental health. So that's the focus of how we're going to use that grant. You've seen in previous presentations, we've asked you for the opportunity to use some of those funds to add additional staff. So some of the things just to point out that we are adding into this grant at this point are 2 math interventionists to address learning loss in math, or some of the gaps from COVID. We added MTSS, our multi-tiered system of support teams, to look at Tier 1 systemic data and support our teachers on their practices in their content areas. And so we added staff to allow release time for those teachers to do that good work. We've added 2 social workers, one at each campus. We have a partnership with the American Institute for Research to support our implementation and adoption of multi-tier system of supports. And then we've started to adopt programs in different content areas. Jeff and I presented in June to you about social emotional learning and some of those programs, so those are written into ESSER 2. The list continues here, some of the things that we brought last month. And then also it's important to point out that we expanded our summer school programming this year significantly. I think Shad said last month that there were more students in school in June than there were in May. And we were able to do that because of these funds from the state and the federal government.
Yes, in addition to what Brett just mentioned, he mentioned HVAC. You were here quite a bit, the terminology indoor air quality. That was one of the main components that was spoke of as we dealt with the pandemic, is how do you increase your air quality and or airflow. Some of the things that we did prior to this year was to increase our filtration. We increased the outdoor airflow inside, and we also are in the process of completing the bipolar ionization. And so the other components of that was to actually look at the other components of our HVAC system, our mechanicals, and how we can upgrade the systems to continue to enhance our indoor air quality. So with that, again, I mentioned the bipolar ionization at both campuses, a makeup air unit, which was presented to the board a couple of months ago at the West Campus, the outdoor air quality test and balancing, the upgrade of the mechanicals in our OTC room. So if you've been in the West Campus, we know that's a very, very tight space. So to increase the airflow there. The other piece to this is cleaning and sanitation. And as we dealt with the pandemic and the cleanliness of our buildings, our campuses, we started to restructure our custodial staff to address not just needs when students are not in the building, which really is 3 o'clock until the next morning, but also during the day. And we realized that that really is an advantage for everyone involved. And so in this grant, we also are adding 4 custodians to be supported through this grant over a 3-year period. So the ESSER 2 actually ends in 2023, and then ARP ends in 2024. And so everything that we're presenting, we're trying to maximize over a three-year period, knowing that when the grants end, we'll be supporting some of these expenditures as a district. So that's part of what we see there. We added custodial equipment for West and Central. We started some of the touchless components at the campuses, but we now have proposals to upgrade all of our touchless components, whether it's the plumbing, the water fountain fixtures in the bathrooms and outside in hallways. So those are those type of proposals. And of course, PPE equipment, whatever that may be in regards to our environment. Another major component was technology. And for us, and every school district are receiving these types of funds. So, and it's different for every school district. Some school districts may utilize all of these dollars for all of technology. Well, we were in a great position when the pandemic started. We won over 12 years. We upgraded our infrastructure. So we had a lot of components in place that many school districts did not have in place as we moved to remote. So our needs were a little different. So one major component is to build redundancy. So essentially, if, let's say, internet goes out, what is the backup for that to keep us operating as a school district? This has always been part of our master plan for technology through our strategic plan. This is going to be an opportunity for us to start to address that need of redundancy throughout the district. Boardroom streaming equipment. So this is a component that was also recommended. How do you, in a remote environment, continue to provide the public and/or community opportunities. And so this is a component that's being paid through the grant. We also, last year, installed the optic backbone streaming in the football fields. So, because then, again, at that time, when we had sports and activities, it was an opportunity for us to stream. These type of things we can continue. We found that, even though it was a pandemic, there were a lot of great things that came out of this, efficiencies that came out of this, that can continue and will be still beneficial as we move forward. The Parsonage Electric Filing for Human Resources. It's a project that we've been wanting to do for a long period of time. And essentially what that is we have tons and tons of boxes of files that now we can have uploaded into an electronic process for accessing. We did the same thing with transcripts. So we now have transcripts electronic online where alumni can order their transcripts online versus having to come to the schools and get paper. And again, with the American Rescue Plan, again, it segues from ESSER 2 right into the American Rescue Plan, or they call it ESSER 3. They all run hand in hand, continuum. Brett and I, Diane, Dr. Guzman, and team, administrators, we are in conversations all the time about which components should go where. Grants are fluid, so we have amendments, we have adjustments, and it's based on the ebbs and flows of what is occurring in our environment and the goals that we need to reach. And so for the American Rescue Plan, initially it was $9.5 million. When the true allocation came out, it's actually $10.2 million, with an additional $2.2 million to support student educational services. So components like after school, summer school, loss of learning, and we have to spend 20% of the ARP program on educational supports for students. Whereas the first two grants, it wasn't the mandate of the actual 20%, but that was one of the components that it needed to be utilized for. So you're seeing some of the same components as you saw in ESSER 2 that was mentioned earlier. In addition to this, we have Panorama and Calm Classrooms. I don't know, Brett, you want to speak to that a little bit in terms of those components?
So I think those are both programs that we've generally overviewed for you, but a quick update. Panorama it does two things for us. It allows us to do a universal screener for social emotional competencies with all of our students, similar to what we do with STAR Reading and STAR Math. It also has an MTSS, or what they call Student Success Dashboard, where it helps our grade level teams and our building teams break down students based on evidence-based need, right? So we've heard us talk about BAG, behavior, attendance, grades, and graduation. This will help us group students, get to root causes and how we can best support our students to have positive outcomes. Calm Classroom, and then on the next slide, Class Catalyst and Facing History Ourselves. Those are social emotional learning programs that we identified through CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, to help us support students transitioning back. And again, just like our restorative practices, community building are tools that our teachers can use to help students be successful. Yeah, so, and then again, Dr. Hampton talked about how when the state allocated its portion of the ARP funds, they allocated specifically for one of the things was summer programming to extend the school year. That was a thing that, they talked about extending the school year for everybody. I think they're using these funds to encourage us to do that. And we were doing that anyway with ESSER 1 or CARES and ESSER 2. And so this funding will allow us to continue that for an additional year without the cost coming back to us locally.
So in addition with the ARP, the projects that are associated with art, we have the central auditorium. So currently, right now, the central auditorium has no air conditioning. It has the airflow, but not the air conditioning. And we're in the process right now of renovating both auditoriums at Central and West, the lighting, the sound, the flooring, the rigging system, and we just felt that this was the perfect time to bring in the air conditioning at the Central campus. So that is being part of that grant. The second floor of the B building at West, the HVA systems, the majority of those mechanicals are the original 1962 mechanicals. And so that is a recommendation. The weight room at the West campus, and the auditorium HVAC units at the West campus. So it's just time to upgrade all of those mechanicals. And this is just a small portion of what the analysis completed by the mechanical engineer. I believe our priority A total was about $14 million. And so this is a small portion of our priority A. And this discussion was with our administrative team, Joe Lopez, Director of Buildings and Grounds, and the supervisors. And then again, the 4 custodial staff. And then with technology, again, the redundancy and personal protective equipment. And you see this twice because we want, again, maximize the 3-year grants as much as possible. And still meet all of the guidelines and parameters of the ESSER 2 and the ARP grant. Are there any questions?
Did any of this pick up the HVAC for Central, for the Central gym? Oh, sorry.
What was the question?
Was any of this able to pick up an HVAC system for the Central gym?
So we had a lot of discussion about should it be the auditorium or the gym at Central. And another reason we chose the auditorium is because the space is more confined. Right? Versus the gym is more open, you can spread out, you can do those things. However, we are going to have the mechanical engineers engineer the gymnasium at Central, because if there's an opportunity for us to get it completed within these grants, then we're going to do that. And we already, Brett and I have talked about it today, because of the additional dollars that we're receiving, because this was already complete before we knew the additional dollars we would receive. Right now, we probably have an additional 1.7 million, and our wheels is turning about the gymnasium at Central. So potentially, as we move through and things change, we think we may have some dollars to support the gymnasium at Central.
That'd be nice to see.
Yeah, I agree.
I would like to say, all the presentations I've had in the last few board meetings and all of this of how we're using the grant money, I'm just really impressed with even the air quality and then the social programs. I'm just impressed with it all. And just to add a little chuckle, I was, you're asking about the air at the PE, and I just remember, so I'm going to age myself, when we got the heat days at Joliet Central, and the kids don't get those heat days anymore.
As someone who taught on the 4th floor at Central, yes, we did. It got quite hot up there.
So I just, I'm glad we're going there, and I'm just very impressed with how this grant money is being used.
Actually, it seems like in some ironic way, COVID was a windfall benefit for the district and other districts as well.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And I think that was important to point out. One of the reasons that we have the ability to do this is because we already had one-to-one technology in place. And so the things that were done, by previous boards, as well as this board continuing, along with the strategic plan, we were in a good place in some areas, as well as you can be during the pandemic.
Yeah, and I would just like to commend you and your staff for the time that we were out of the school building. The massive improvements that were made, not just in renovations, but stuff like the HVAC and the upgrades to prepare us for August for our full return, that it was so well maximized that, I just want to commend you and your staff for that.
Thank you.
In the last presentation, can you hear me? It sounds a little strange. The last presentation, and we definitely wanted to follow Dr. Hampton and Mr. Markham with the plan for grant funding, is the Return to Learn plan. This actually went out to parents to solicit feedback. That's one of the requirements of the third round of funding. So the American Rescue Plan Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Program, and I'm not going to read this to you, but within 30 days of receiving allocations, you have to have the plan available for feedback. So the plan did go out. We have a link for feedback. We're collecting feedback, and we will continue to do so, and then we'll provide the board with feedback. Again, this came out, the allocations came out, guidance came out, all within, I think, 5 days of each other. And so we worked to put the information together for the board so that you can make an informed decision. The reference documents are hyperlinked there. I, again, won't go into detail, but it does include the resolution for in-person learning from the Illinois State Board of Education, as well as the question and answer document, COVID-19 testing in schools, frequently asked questions, guidance for prevention, and then interim guidance on testing for COVID-19 in community settings and schools. It's important to note that since March of 2020, Joliet Township High School has not been independently making COVID-19 health decisions and requirements. We've been following IDPH, ISBE, the Will County Health Department, as well as the Illinois High School Association for Athletics. We're not public health officials, so we have been following the guidance from the officials. And this plan does recommend that we continue to follow the guidance from IDPH, ISBE, and the local health department on the following topics: masks, face coverings, remote learning requirements, seating and social distancing, which would include classroom, lunch, and the bus, contact tracing, quarantine/isolation, and then testing as well as vaccine. And so those are the entities. It's important to note too, we continue and have been receiving additional guidance throughout the year. So we know that things change, and as guidance is updated, then we update and bring those things to the Board of Education. So regarding quarantine guidance, during the 2020-2021 school year, the district was required to quarantine individuals who were directly exposed to an individual with COVID-19 if they were within 6 feet of the individual for more than 15 minutes in a 24-hour period, regardless of masks. There's a modified quarantine option available for the 21-22 school year. So the current guidelines, if they were adopted, would be individuals who are fully vaccinated do not need to quarantine if they are directly exposed to an individual with COVID-19 unless they are experiencing symptoms. An additional modified quarantine option is available to schools participating in COVID-19 screenings. We are participating, and those would be directly affecting students who are part of the screening process. And I'll go through that in a little bit. So in regards to masks and social distancing, the recommendation is currently that the district will continue to follow the recommendations for mask wearing from IDPH, and the current guidance is that masks should be worn indoors by all individuals ages 2 and older who are fully vaccinated. Consistent and correct mask use by people who are not fully vaccinated is especially important indoors and in crowded settings where physical distancing cannot be maintained. It's important to note we have almost 3,400 students in each campus and about 350 staff members each day. We cannot socially distance in our hallways. We cannot socially distance in our cafeteria and get everyone served lunch. And in some of our smaller classrooms, we won't be able to socially distance, the 6 feet. It'll be closer to 3 feet, might be even a little bit closer. So those are just some things for the board to be aware of. Part of the guidance does state if you are going to remove mitigation strategies, you do them one at a time. So we know we can't socially distance. So that is why masks are an important topic of a discussion, because currently we only know of about a little over 6% of our students being vaccinated. So right now, that's where our number stands, which aligns to the state, because the number for the state, if you look at it, students from ages 12 to 17 represent about 5% of the overall vaccines right now. And then types of school testing. So per IDPH and ISBE, COVID-19 testing should be prioritized in the following order. Persons with symptoms of COVID-19, regardless of vaccination status. Unvaccinated persons who are determined to be close contacts with someone with active COVID-19. Unvaccinated staff and students with possible exposure in the context of an outbreak setting, and that is 5+ cases linked together. And then they recommend that testing be increased to 2 times per week. Screening of unvaccinated staff and or students when the risk of transmission is high to moderate as a strategy to identify asymptomatic positives. So with shield testing, per IDPH, this type of screening is most helpful in identifying new cases to prevent outbreaks, reducing risk of further transmission, and protecting students and staff from COVID-19. Schools can administer COVID-19 tests or have companies come in to administer testing. Any testing would require parent or guardian consent, which is what we're currently doing. In our current numbers right now, we have 77, or a little over 1% of our student population who have consented to testing. IDPH entered into a partnership with Shield, Illinois. This is the same entity that was doing testing at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. And due to their screening, they cited that they were able to stay under 1% positivity beginning in September, and they never went above that. And so that, again, is the same entity. So we are currently piloting shield testing with summer school students and are currently expanding that and collecting consent from students and families that wish to participate. So this just talks a little bit about the screening program. It is at all Illinois districts with high school enrollment have access to shield testing, and IDPH provides the test in a trained third party to collect the test at no cost to schools who are in evidence-based funding tiers 1 and 2. And we are tier 1, so it's no cost to the district. And so again, they're coming out, they've been doing it once a week on Thursdays. It's a very small number right now, and it's a rolling enrollment. For the 2021-22 school year, this is again part of the guidance. Schools who participate in the screening program are eligible for a modified quarantine. And we want the least amount of students possible who have to go into quarantine. So only students participating in the screening are eligible, but students and staff are considered directly exposed if they are less than 3 feet for 15 minutes. So it takes the 6 feet to the 3 feet for contact tracing and determining who has to quarantine. Unvaccinated students who do not participate in screening program will need to quarantine if they are within 6 feet of the individual who is diagnosed with COVID-19. So the modified quarantine will could potentially greatly reduce the number of students and staff who may need to quarantine, and this would hopefully result in less staff and students placed in the required quarantine in a less chaotic environment. Another part of the plan, obviously safety measures, but also just the road to getting students back on track. And so, first of all, with our instructional model, the plan includes that the district will resume a traditional full-day schedule, including lunch on all regular student attendance days. The school hours will follow the regular school day hours. So for 9th grade students, that's 7:20 to 3:15. And for 10th and 11th grade and 12th grade students, that's 8:20 to 3:15. According to ISBE, remote learning will only be available to students who are required to quarantine due to COVID-19. And that has been a question that we have gotten. We still have homebound that we can provide, but that's not for students on quarantine. That goes through our homebound procedures that we follow, again, legislation. So remote learning, like it was last year, is not something we can offer this year. And so we wanted to differentiate between remote learning and homebound or home instruction. They're different. Support enrollment, retention, and re-engagement. So these are some of the things that we focused on. Phone calls and home visits to incoming 9th grade students who have not completed registration. Phone calls for current students not in compliance with health physicals and immunizations. That we're not talking about the COVID vaccine there. We're talking about required immunizations and physicals. Phone calls for COVID screening and vaccination information collection. 9th grade summer orientation program in August. Ongoing communication with families throughout the summer regarding the instructional program and plan for the 2021-22 school year. Continue parent-teacher conferences in the fall and spring during this upcoming school year, and plan and implement parent and community universities during the 21-22 school year. Building and individualized student databases and academic behavioral diagnostics and progress monitoring capabilities. And again, this is with guidance, and the board has approved many of these things throughout the year. So that includes our implementation of our multi-tiered system of supports for grade level teams, the continued implementation of 5Lab, which is a data dashboard that we implemented last year to monitor small and large groups of students regarding behavior, attendance, and grades so that we can put in the needed interventions. We migrated to a new student management system to allow for better storage and access of student information to use in conjunction with all the various platforms that we use or that we're using next year. And some of those we've already talked about this evening. We also talked about summer learning and the summer program expansion. So our summer 2001 included summer credit recovery. You have the report in your board packet tonight. Summer school get ahead courses, summer bridge targeting incoming 9th graders, summer program for students with IEPs, and summer orientation for incoming 9th grade students in August. Also, the summer transportation for all programs, including athletics, to try and remove obstacles for students and families, and then plan these and additional opportunities for next summer. Out of classroom learning experiences to try and bridge some gaps. So again, we did the summer bridge program for 9th grade students and our summer program for IEP students. We will continue with virtual tutoring after school evenings and weekends, implement our math interventionist program, which is an in-person support program during and after school. Gateway to Graduation program, which targets students from the class of 2022 who are deficient in 1 or 2 classes so that they can access online classwork, and with the goal being that they graduate on time. And then our Gateway to Graduation 2.0, which targets students from the classes of 2023 and 2024 who are off track and will participate in the program during the school day. It includes both academic and social and emotional supports. We have many partnerships, but we're focusing on the partnerships that we're going into this year, specific to getting kids back on track and social emotional learning. So our partnership with Kids Matter, as well as our continued partnership with JJC and the TRIO program to try and help students with that continuum from high school on to post-secondary. Enhance accessibility of academic and behavioral counseling resources. The board approved additional positions for this year, which includes the 3 social workers. We implemented the Director of Student Support Services, release time for MTSS grade level teachers, the consultant costs to support the implementation, the instructional coach for the EL bilingual program, the math interventionist and parapro at each campus, and consultant costs to support the continued implementation of restorative practices. And again, many of those presentations you heard tonight. And then invest in an infrastructure for mental wellness and trauma-informed, culturally responsive schools. So continue to implement our behavioral health team process, which helps identify students with various needs. Implementation of Panorama, which Mr. Markham talked about, and students will be screened 3 times annually. Partnership with Kids Matter to implement district-wide social and emotional curriculum in all physical education and health classes during the upcoming year. Implementation of a structured social and emotional curriculum in identified core classes. Continued implementation of implement bias training for all staff that was interrupted due to COVID. Continue cultural responsive cohorts, and Mrs. McDonald talked about that during her presentation, and continued implementation of implicit bias and cultural responsiveness training for students during the 21-22 school year, and then also continue with the implementation of our Pathways program. Another component is to evaluate and improve hybrid remote learning models to develop long-term digital strategic priorities. The board had approved the additional hardware that was purchased, so additional streaming technology for all classroom has been purchased and been installed in all classrooms. So we are ready to go for students that will have to quarantine. And many of our teachers have been using it this summer with our summer programming. So again, JTHS will continue to review and revise student and staff supports as we progress through the 21-22 school year. The ROE, Regional Office of Education, was able to set up a meeting for local superintendents with the Will County Health Department, where we will get to hear what their guidance is for us on a local level. And then, again, we'll wait and see if we also get additional guidance from the state. I'm not sure if that will happen or if it will, because it happened throughout all last year. So what questions do you have for me?
I have a question. Just a point of clarification as we kind of learn about this. And, you know, for some of our guests that are still here. So the recommendation is from the Illinois Department of Public Health and for the CDC to follow these guidelines. So just as we start school in August, which is a few weeks away, I'm just trying to get an idea of the vision of reality of what's going to happen. Is this, it's a recommendation, it's a favorable suggestion, but is this, do you view this as a mandate for kids who are not vaccinated or vaccinated to wear masks?
The state, all those entities absolutely stop short of using language for a mandate, and that's the guidance from the district attorney too. It stops short of a mandate. It's guidelines, but many of the guidelines throughout have been phrased in that way as well. So it's not a mandate, it's the recommended guidance that we follow.
So as a recommended guidance, it's not a mandate. So kids who come into our school, they could either observe the recommendation or not observe the recommendation, right?
Well, that would be up to the school board's determination of how we approach this. I'm, again, very concerned about not only safety, but the quarantining rules and the what could happen if we have 3,400 kids and the majority of them aren't vaccinated, and if a large proportion of them don't have masks on, then we're going to be, we know we can't socially distance. So we could be having a lot of kids having to quarantine. Because as far as I understand, the quarantining rules, those are, I believe, a mandate. But I can get that answered by the Will County Health Department.
Yeah, and again, I'm just kind of focusing on the word recommendation, because a recommendation isn't a mandate. It's, somebody gives me a recommendation, I could surely take it, or I could surely not take it. And so as school starts here, we're gonna have, 600 to 800 kids coming to West and Central combined. And I think you mentioned only, 6% have signed up or volunteered their vaccination cards. So a lot of these kids, if they do come into the schools and they're not wearing masks, okay, will there be any discipline for them? What will actually happen day 1, day 2, day 3, as these kids are just coming into the school?
We would work to contact families to discuss, the various rules surrounding quarantining. That's what we do if a student is not following a rule or requirement that we have in place. I wouldn't recommend that we go to exclude a student from school. That would be very difficult
So there
to
would not
do,
be
and
like,
I wouldn't
okay,
want to do that.
Student comes into school, no mask on. At that point, would they be stopped, or would they be asked for a vaccination card? And if, let's say they're not being vaccinated, or whatever the case may be, would there be any discipline for the student or anything?
We would not, like I just said, we wouldn't want to exclude the student. We wouldn't, try and pull them out of class. We wouldn't, in front of anyone, talk to them about it. It would be a conversation with the student and the parent, the way we talk to students if they violate another rule, like dress code or something like that.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Yeah, if I could just say, Mr. Scroop had good questions, because I've had parents ask me, I'm not going to send my child to school in a mask. What's going to happen? Well, we just found out that legally, there's no teeth to the recommendation that the state has put on all of these school districts. Like he said, it's recommended, but it doesn't have to be followed, which equates to, when you look at this, it's an option. It's an option that's given. If we can't mandate it and there's no discipline, I don't want to see our staff become overburdened in, if we have 50, 500, or 5,000 students show up without a mask, there's nothing we can do, is what I'm understanding, correct? There's nothing discipline-wise.
Like
there's nothing we can do to put a mask on that child's face.
We would not,
So, right, so what I'm
that.
saying, and in response to Mr. Scrupa's questions, we're following the guidance. Whether we agree or disagree, we've been following the guidance. If they're recommending it, but they're not demanding or mandating it, we're basically being put in an optional, they're going to come in with or without the masks, and in all reality, there's nothing to approach them on, there's nothing to confront them on, they're not going to be put out of school. It basically is, you're walking in with or without a mask, and you're going to go to school throughout the day and get the education we're going to provide. Is that a true?
It's a very difficult situation that schools are in right now, and that school boards are in right now in making these decisions. The board also needs to just be aware of the liability concerns, which, I've shared in the past too. And so it's a difficult place for everyone.
Right, it's difficult, I understand the liability, but we're presented, unfortunately, with a situation that we have to make a decision on that those much higher up have passed on to us. They, for some reason, have refused to make the call, so now it's delegated to us. And our thing with Mr. Skrupa is asking on day one, when these students arrive at school, and I'm sure we will have an abundance of students that will decide, or their parents will decide, they're not going to wear a mask. They're going to come into our school without a mask on. It's clarification now that at this point, if this mandate, or if this recommendation that is given doesn't change, they're going to come into school without a mask. They're going to remain in school. They're going to go through a normal day. And other than that, that is the extent of it, correct?
Yes, we would call and work with parents, like I said before, and talk to the student, and we would just have to know who's refusing
Right.
and who's not.
So regardless of the wording, if you just look at it, the masks are optional. They are optional because they're not mandated. And if those that choose, just like tonight, those that choose to wear the mask, by all means wear the mask, but in no way can we force someone to put the mask on.
We would be in a difficult position.
Yes.
Dr. Guzman, can you expound on liability? What does that mean? Liable.
So, again, when we talked and got guidance from attorneys, and then we also talked to our own insurance carrier, the guidance that we're given is that we should follow the CDC recommendations, you know, as it relates to, any CDC recommendation or IDPH. And that's what we've been doing this entire time. It's the standard of care we're required to provide to students and staff. And so if we're not following the guidance, we could potentially be accused of not providing a standard of care.
Next question is, how many, are all staff vaccinated?
I do not believe all staff are vaccinated. I believe we have a good percentage of staff that are vaccinated. To date, well, as of sometime this afternoon, we had 513 staff that we've confirmed are vaccinated. We do have about 1,000 staff members, and not everyone is probably submitted. Due to us housing the vaccination site, we know that many staff went through it, but we don't know the exact number. So that's the most current number that I have.
Going off of Mrs. Stiff's question, when you talk about liability, like what could it cost a district? We were in charge of keeping our community, financially secure too, is what could it cost the community by having a parent sue the district on not enforcing mask mandates?
I couldn't give you a number of what that is. I'm not sure, and so I wouldn't want to put a fictitious number out there. I don't think I could answer that question.
But it could cost a district a lot of money if there were enough parents that child caught COVID at school.
Potentially. It's a concern that I think everyone needs to be aware of.
Oh, and I agree that the liability, but when we say not enforcing a mask mandate, there is no mask mandate. It's a recommendation. And when we have, and what I'm trying to ascertain here is if on day one, if we're not prepared and we don't have the questions answered, if we have a large amount of students that show up without the mask, but we are following the CDC guidelines, they are recommending that we ask the students to wear a mask.
Let me clarify, there's not a state mandate, but we as a school board can vote and make the rules just as we have on dress code. And just like if a kid shows up in their underwear, we're not gonna allow them in school. So it's kind of like, yes, we have these rules, but in that case, would we exclude a student for that? So as we go through this, we have to have all sides of it. So you're right, it's not a mandate, but we as a board get to decide. Well, unfortunately, the state makes us decide if we can have a rule or not. So I think we're getting confused in the language there. So the state doesn't have a mandate, but it's up to, unfortunately, us to decide what we decide is best for the community, the district, and financial.
And I understand it, but what I'm saying is, if we're going to be sued for not following the guidelines, we are following the guidelines, because we are putting in, if we were to say right now that we were to vote on that JTHS is going to adopt the IDPH guidelines that vaccinated do not have to wear a mask, unvaccinated, it is recommended, and if we recommend it, but they don't take the recommendation, where does our liability fall? Because we're not mandated to do it. I'm just trying to answer the question on day one, when these students do show up without the masks. It's already been made clear, there's no discipline, there's no repercussion. We can ask the parents, we're not even gonna approach the student, because the student is there willingly without the mask.
We just had a presentation here, and I don't think I once saw, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I once saw the word mandate in here. A recommendation, okay, a lot of recommendations, which I view as a favorable suggestion, I can take it or not take it, whatever the case may be, which seems to be very optional, but no mandate. So if we follow what we just saw is going forward into the, school year here pretty soon, we're doing what the state recommends. But it's almost, here's our policy, now whatever the community decides to do, whatever their decision is, whether they come in with a mask or not with a mask, only 6%, 7% of the kids even turned in a vaccination card so far.
So most of the kids would be in masks then?
Well, I don't know.
Well,
I have no idea.
by
I'm not
rules.
saying- We're not even getting a high return on kids who are voluntarily giving vaccination cards. So I'm assuming, I couldn't even know what the situation would be with schools.
So in theory, by our vaccinations records, we would have about 94% of the school in
Well,
masks.
no, because a lot of kids, there could still be kids
Right
beyond
now.
this number that they just don't want to give the card for whatever personal reasons, right? They just don't want to turn in the card. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't think we know where these numbers are.
Right.
Is it 6% that's really vaccinated? Is it 10, 12, 15, 20? How many are holding back? I have no idea. All I know is the doors are gonna open and here come the kids.
Well, I mean, based on state data, it's pretty accurate with the state data of how
It's
many-
aligned to the state data.
I had a question. What about, the parents that, the immune-compromised kids, the kids with health issues, are we having precautions for them? Because masks really only protect one way, as the data has showed. Do we have precautions for those kids that their liberties and their things are being protected too, and their health is being considered as much as other kids' medical decisions?
There's nothing more than trying to follow the guidance to the best of our rules with the mitigation, with trying to do social distancing as much as possible, and again, unvaccinated individuals wearing masks.
So if they're saying, no, we can't control kids that wear unvaccinated masks, we're putting our most at-risk kids in a huge situation of potentially life-threatening health conditions.
Potentially.
Which opens ourselves up to huge liabilities.
Potentially.
Okay,
What other-
And again, I understand what you're saying, but even if we mandate the mask and the kids don't come in without a mask, you've already said we're not putting them out of school. So what do we do with these children that come in our buildings without a mask on?
Why don't we,
I would like to say that we haven't even made a decision yet. So
Right, and that's what I'm trying to get answers to questions that I've been asked from community and parents that I don't know the answer to. That's what I'm trying to gain. So when we do on August 11th, we have more information that we can discuss, unless the guidelines change between now and then.
but our job as a board is to make to vote on the recommendations and the rules, right?
Absolutely.
It's Dr. Guzman's job to enforce those.
Right.
So if we make this as a board, as our decision, we have trusted and confidence and hired Dr. Guzman to follow through in our action plans. And so far, what I've seen, she's done that. So if we're gonna vote as a board, we need to trust our superintendent to carry out our decisions.
Right, and I understand that, and that's why I asked her, and Mr. Scroop asked, what discipline could be given, because we could mandate her to enforce the masks, but if she has no legal authority to administer any type of discipline, any directive correct me if I'm wrong, any directive we give to you, if it's still not enforceable, what are you going to do? We could tell you, make the kids wear a mask, but how are you going to do it?
Like I said, we would do it to the best of our ability, and we'd try and intervene with students and with parents. That is what we would do.
All right.
I had two more questions. If students are 18, do they need the parental consent at that point? For
screening?
For screening?
No.
Okay. And then my other question is.
They would have to consent.
Right, they would have to. That was my question. Can vaccinated students and staff, because if you're vaccinated, you can still catch COVID. Can vaccinated students and staff participate in shield testing willingly, if they choose to?
They could. We, because of our numbers, we were starting with unvaccinated, but if we don't have the numbers, then we could expand that.
Okay, that was my question.
I have no other questions.
Any other questions?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will move on to our action items. I don't know for the record. Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, there was just
Go
one.
ahead.
There's one more report in there. It's not a presentation, but it's the annual spring credit recovery report. We'd be happy to answer any questions, but that's the program that extends the second semester and allows students additional time to demonstrate understanding and earn credit in the class. So that's just in the board packet. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer.
I just want to say it's a great program. Where I work is also, we have something similar to it, and it's just a great program, and I'm glad that the school is offering it.
I just want to commend the special ed teachers at Wilson, special ed coordinators. They really, they focused in on a specific group of students with IEPs, and the students worked over those 4 days on multiple classes. So some students actually recouped more than like one class. So they really, they went above and beyond what was expected. So again, the only students that weren't successful are the ones that just, they registered, but they didn't show up.
Okay. Before we move on to action items, I think it's just for the record, before we start voting, that Ms. Guerrero, new mayor, has had to leave. So when we do call her name for any votes, if you've been called, let it be known that she is not present at this time. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to first action item A, educational equity consultants contract. Can I get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
That's just the continuation of our fourth cohort with the consultants we've been working with for the last 3 years.
Okay, no questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Skrupa?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. The next one, B, restoring community contract. Motion to approve.
Motion to approve?
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
That is just our continued partnership with our consultant who is coaching us and providing training in restorative practices.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Skrupa?
Yes.
Next, C, the E, Zanuck Bass Consulting Contract. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Any questions or comments?
This is the other consultant that Mrs. McDonald talked about. This is a new partnership.
Okay. Roll call?
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Skrupa?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Next is D, our Workforce Service Division, Policy 8, colon 25. Motion to approve.
Motion to approve?
Second? Questions or comments?
Yes, this is a request to utilize our parking lots for advertising and promoting the Workforce Services Resource Fair. And just to let you know, I checked with the buildings, and this would not cause any issues with any of our summer programming or any of our orientation programs.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Scrupa?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Mrs. Steph?
Abstain.
Next is E, our substitute pay recommendation. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
The only item I would like to point out is that it does include some permanent task force subs for the upcoming school year, 4 per building, because we want to be prepared in case we need to quarantine or staff, so we want to be prepared so it's not a chaotic environment.
Okay, very well.
I have a question. So they'll be in the building every day? Okay.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Scrupa?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Next is F, our network agreement between Guardian Angel Community Services and the Joliet Township High School. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. Questions or comments?
This is our continued partnership, and it's an annual agreement that goes to the board.
Roll call.
Mr. Scrupa?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Next, under G, donations, policy 8:80. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Just always very thankful for our donations.
Very thankful for those that are so generous to our district.
It's awesome.
Yes. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Scrupa?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Next will be our personnel reports under policy 5:30, 5:180, 5:185, and 5:210, 1 through 12. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Questions or comments? None. Roll call, please.
Mr. Scrupa?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Next, unfinished business.
We just wanted to provide feedback on and answer some questions regarding our procedures for district-issued electronic devices, specifically cell phones. So Dr. Hampton was going to provide an update.
Yes, just continued information from last board meeting. Just wanted to break down some of the data. Of the 40 cell phones, 8 are flip phones, utilized mostly by transportation staff, so that when bus drivers are on the road, long trips, they have a way to communicate back and forth, and also the mechanics. And those phones are left at the transportation center. We have 32 staff who have smartphones that range from technology to supervisors to administrators. As you know, many of those individuals, all those individuals, are asked to be available whenever needed. So for us as a district, we've decided to issue the phones, and if you use it just for business, work-related, then there's no cost. If you using it as a dual purpose, it's $120 a year that each person would have to pay towards this service. And of the 32, there's roughly 13 individuals that are paying either the $10 a month or the $120 a year.
And then I didn't get any additional questions, but I did talk with the district attorney to see if there was any concerns with the procedure and that we're currently using, and there's not. And then also there was a question regarding FOIA and whether it's personal or a district-issued phone. If you use it for business, it can be FOIA'd, but only for responsive records. And so that is something too that we make staff aware of.
So out of the phone total, how many, we were talking about this at the last meeting, how many employees have a phone for just personal, just like one phone? Or just it's a combination?
13.
13, okay, 13. Okay.
Of the 32.
So, okay, so the employee's paying $10 a month into the phone, into a service plan for the carrier. Do we know a gauge, like how
That's something I talked with Brian Starr about. I mean, this has been in place over 20 years in the district.
Because that would suggest to me
Yeah.
that $10, I would say you got a $100 a month service plan.
Well,
I
most of them-
that'd be saying like 10%, I got a phone, I'm only using it.
Yeah,
90% for business,
yeah.
10% for
Yeah,
personal.
so
That's
most-
what the number would
Yeah,
suggest.
so most plans are not, they're $29 to $49, depending on the
Okay,
plan.
all right.
And that is one of the items I did talk to Brian Shaw about. This comes out of his department where, we need to do, audits, right?
Right.
But just to make sure that everyone's following the policy the way they're supposed to.
So say 49.50, so that would suggest
About 25%.
25% is personal. Okay.
Okay.
No further questions?
Okay, anyone else? Our next one, B, is our anti-racism commitment.
Yes, really the update, monthly update was really in Mrs. McDonald's presentation. We are moving ahead with our plans for doing our staff training, our cohort, and again, the cultural responsive training team is meeting this week to talk about some additional ideas they have with potential community training that would involve some community outreach. I talked to Mr. Sieper about it today, and so he's going to be talking to the team about it.
Very good. Next, we have new business under A. It's a first reading of policy. It's policy 2:240. And under that is number 1, 7:190, under student behavior, and number 2, a discipline framework.
So number 1 is I'm going to call it a minor change to make it more explicitly clear within the policy that possessing or using any aerosol or spray substance that has the effect of disabling people or animals, such as mace or pepper spray, or animal repellent, is not allowed. So the recommendation from the district attorney was to add a 19th item to the list of just notices to students, and then that specific language then would also be in this, we would put it in the handbook, so it is also explicit in the handbook.
Okay, and then number 2, the discipline framework.
So the number 2 discipline framework, Mr. Kennedy asked that that be put on as an agenda item, and so that is in your board packet. I did get a question and a suggestion from a board member to get attorney guidance on it, and so I did that. And so after reviewing that, the district attorney talked about that we're not supposed to have a dictated outcome. It is our obligation to consider each incident before coming to a decision, and we cannot have these formulas according to legislation. And I also want to let you know that I did let Mr. Kennedy know that too. I talked to him and let him know because I knew he wasn't going to be able to be here today.
Okay, and then, like I said, this is a first reading, so this will be addressed at the next board meeting in
Correct.
August.
Yep.
Okay, very well. Any questions?
So the modification framework would be something that would be in the handbook, or is it just something that deans and things would go by?
I believe, and again, Mr. Kennedy, this was his item to put on the agenda, and he said he would be happy to answer any questions, but I believe it was more the procedure.
Okay.
That potentially the board would direct the district to use.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no other questions? Next are board reports, if there are any. There are none. Finally, any announcements? No announcements. And finally, any further public comment? Again, ma'am, if you could please state your name. We'll
Sure.
keep it to 5 minutes.
Is this on? I'm Christine McGovern. First of all, I'm glad I stayed. I am impressed with your programs that you have here. I think that you do a lot with the kids, and we don't have that in Chicago. I also am a teacher. I am alarmed at how much you're spending. It doesn't look like you have a bullying issue or a racism issue. It It's a lot of money to be put into your budget. I do want to point out that the one woman who spoke when she was leaving could use some personality skills. She was very rude. One of the parents asked for a definition, and she told him to look it up in the dictionary. And that's who you have teaching your staff. That's a problem. The other issue is if the state government cannot tell you what to do with the kids, you need to be more concise with your answer. There's not going to be any repercussions for the kids if they don't wear a mask, period. There's not going to be any liability, period. So you can get that nervousness or objection. As far as special needs kids, they have a 504 plan, they have an IEP plan, they already have a system in place. This is nothing new. They're not going to be in graver damage or danger. I have a niece who had a traumatic brain injury. When it's flu season, she stays home. The teacher comes to her. There's other things that you can do as a school if you're very concerned about that. I think all in all, I think as a school board and what I've seen with the presentations was really good. I think that having 6% of the kids vaccinated and not being able to implement the 3-foot to 6-foot rule, you're causing chaos. Just admit now, you're not going to follow their recommendations or you're going to have a lot of kids absent, and that's not fair. There's a lot of kids who had COVID already. My kids had it. They survived. I didn't get it. It's alarming to think that you're going to alienate that 94% of the kids because they're not vaccinated. That's not fair. That's not right. So a lot of the parents who were here this morning, or not this morning, earlier, they wanted to know what was going to be implemented. You need to have a concise answer. There's not going to be any reprimand for the kids. It's the parents' choice. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Get vaccinated, don't get vaccinated. You're right. She is appointed to this position, but she needs to answer her board members' questions concisely. So when we post, when we get home, what is Joliet School District doing? You're going to follow the recommendations, but it's not mandated. Is that an accurate statement?
We're not going to answer questions. We're giving the follow-up to public comment at this point.
Okay, so when can parents expect that?
Well, and on August 11th, we're going to have the meeting for the vote, 7 p.m.
Okay, because you can kind of tell where everyone sits in here, and everyone's opinion is valuable, and everyone's opinion is important. But remember, 96% of the kids are not vaccinated and have a different route than a couple of the members on the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Again, can you please state your name? Keep it to 5 minutes.
Tina McGrath. I just want to make it known. So we were all sitting right here. It was Sarah Best Warren, who she was asked by the Vietnam vet if she could explain what equity meant, and she looked him in the face and said, "Get a dictionary," and walked away. This is your consultant. That's ridiculous, unacceptable. I just don't, I guess this is kind of directed at the folks in masks. I mean, if you're vaccinated and you're still wearing masks, how much faith do you have in that vaccine? You said yourself that you can still catch COVID if you have it. If you can catch COVID, you can pass COVID. We're all going to be exposed. It's a virus. It is a virus. You know, I would recommend that maybe you encourage your staff who have weight problems to drop some weight, or if they have some, if they're immunocompromised, that they stay home. But to penalize all of your students 96% of students who are not vaccinated, they don't need to be forced into masks. Your paper mask isn't stopping a virus, period. We know this. You are intelligent, educated people. The data supports that. It doesn't stop the virus. Do not put these kids in masks again. And our health decisions are our health decisions. What I choose to do for my family is my business, not yours. You are paid to educate, period. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? If none, we'll close that part, and we'll need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Second. Roll call?
Mr. Ellison?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff? Yes. Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Skrupa?
Yes.
Meeting's over.